Let it rip.
All right. Okay, welcome to the August 28th Nantucket Conservation Commission meeting. I ask that everybody turn off or silence your cell phone. If you need to have conversation, please leave the room. If you want to address or speak to the board, please come up front, say your name, and speak clearly into the microphone. That means you have to get like 3 inches from the microphone to be heard. We'll probably remind you if you don't stand close enough. I think that's all I need to say. Yeah, no pressure. So we are going to start with public comment on items that are not being heard tonight.
Okay. Oh, we're doing the share? Okay.
It's easier for everyone.
Okay. RJ Turcott, Nantucket Land Council. Ooh,
It's going to be all
crispy
of them.
one. Okay. So it has come to our attention through email, and I'll submit these to you for you guys to take a look at, that SPPF has changed their monitoring protocol from quarterly to biannual, and the Land Council has been inquiring around to try to figure out where this amendment is and whether it was amended by you guys, because after 3 years of quarterly monitoring, they are allowed to apply for an amendment and change it to biannual, which they've made pretty clear in their reports that they'd like to do less monitoring. But thus far, we haven't been able to find this amendment. So we would like the commission to look into that, because, I mean, especially the spring monitoring is critical to tell if the project is actually doing what they say it's doing. And we think it's also really, really relevant and critical considering tomorrow's site visit with DEP and considering an expanded project. So that's it.
Thank you. Jeff,
I'll say
do
that
you
is
know
something we
anything
are
about that?
actively looking into as well. So we'll hopefully have that resolved in the next 24 hours.
Okay.
But-
highlighted.
Yep. So if the copy of that could just land with me
Yeah, I
at the
think
end,
that's the-
you guys feel free to look at it, but we're definitely looking into it.
Send it back at you.
Any other public comment? Okay, so items that are continued this evening, we have Mary D. Starr at 19 East Creek Road is continued till September 25th. Gregory Reyes at 19 East Creek Road is continued till September 25th. Laz Family Nominee Trust at 20 Wakuit Road is continued until September 11th. And then in our certificates of compliance, we have Hardman at 51B Matticat Road, continued until September 11th. Okay, so we will begin tonight with Marcia Fader at 36 Liberty Street.
I'm going to recuse myself. Madam Chair, so will I.
Okay.
I have to sit.
Yeah.
It's easier for you to get into the microphone that way.
These are
Yep, those are the landscape plan and the survey, but I'll leave them alone.
okay.
I think there's the landscape plan, they're a little different.
The landscape plan is based on the site plan, so I think it shows any changes and shows whatever. Used to speaking, sitting down. David Haynes for the applicant, Marcia Fader. What,
Guys, can we quiet down, please?
what we have, are presenting is a notice of intent to continue the routine maintenance that's occurred out on the site since 1910. It was a landscaped area, it was established as a lawn, there was a man-made pond put in, and there was extensive landscaping. There is a plan that's shown in the notice of intent along with a vegetative list of what was originally put in and planted, and designed. The area does, there are areas that do qualify as vegetated wetlands because of the soil conditions. The vegetation in there is mostly upland. It is mowed. The pond has been maintained for all those years by removing weeds and maintaining the vegetation that's in there. What Ms. Fader would like to do is to continue doing that exact same maintenance. We have delineated the wetlands. The wetlands include a bordering vegetated wetland, and under your bylaw, land underwater, it would not qualify as land underwater under the Mass Wetlands Protection Act because of its size. And we would like to continue maintaining it as it is and doing additional plantings of some of the historic plants and also native indigenous wetland plants to put in there, and increase the vegetative list. She's lost several big trees in the recent years, some big copper beeches. She'd like to put some more back in there, some cedars, hollies, hibiscus, various things. And over along the property line to Mr. To the elder property, there's a wetland on their property, and they would like to plant a hedge of inkberry, and also to put a fence, a wildlife-friendly fence. Historically, the fences around here have been sort of a twisted wire. I mean, the old twisted wire that anybody that's been walking around probably knows what I'm talking about. But from that period, she would like to put that back up. It's just 2 strands of basically a wire fence, if she can find it. If she can't find it, she's satisfied with whatever fence is acceptable to the commission. She would rather not use a split rail fence, but it's basically the same thing as a split rail fence in terms of allowing wildlife to pass through and not blocking any wildlife. There is some stonework along the edge of the pond. There is a small pond with a liner in it, so it is not jurisdictional. Just up above, there's a wooden bridge. She would like permission to continue to maintain those areas. There is a bank. A portion of the bank of the pond has collapsed because of deer activity running across it, and she would like to shore that up with a little bit of soil and then a landscape netting, and then put a temporary fence there till it gets established to keep the deer from running through it. Other plantings are proposed in the pond, and then try to remove as much of the vegetation in the pond on an annual basis to keep the pond as deep as possible and to keep it from filling in with vegetation. Because if she doesn't, this is what they've done there since they bought the well, it was her whatever. It's been in the family for quite a while. They've done that, and it's been done like that to maintain it as an open water body. If they stop doing that, it's just going to fill in with vegetation and then fill in with cattails and look like the lily pond. So all the work would be done by hand, and no machinery would be involved. And basically that's my presentation.
Great, thank you. Any questions from the commission?
I had a question about something that, let's see.
Nope, that's not working.
Oh, that's not.
That's why it's down.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, sorry. About that they
That's not
wanted
working
to, under the scope of work, they want to put in some temporary equipment for special events, and I was just,
Well,
I was
think
wondering what that.
we're tr-
It's an addition, you know,
Well,
something different. I was
I mean,
curious.
basically, they want to keep using it as a lawn, and they might put a tent up for for a wedding or a party or something back there.
Oh,
That's,
okay.
that's all that was, I believe that's all. There's
Oh,
no,
okay.
there's no permanent structure.
Right, no,
was-
it said it was temporary, but it was just,
Yeah.
it kind of jumped out as
I
something
mean,
odd,
we were
that's
s-
all.
We were sort of advised to say how the land is, how it's used and
Mhm.
what it's going to be I mean, so yes.
Yeah,
That-
okay,
That was just, no permanent structures.
thank you.
So I had a question about some of the species listed. It looked like you were gonna be adding or expanding on some cultivar species that normally we wouldn't allow within a wetland area. That didn't seem to be on that original list. So like the hibiscus that's listed as Luna Red. You know, we'd want the straight species, cause they didn't have those cultivars back in 1910, you know?
Marcia, did you hear the concern about the cultivar, the hibiscus?
You need to come up and speak into the mic.
Hi, Marcia Fader. Yeah, I thought I was matching what was there, the different hibiscus on the property. And I'm not the botanist, so if there's a change, that's fine.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a question about the removal of the vegetation, the aquatic vegetation from the pond.
Mm-hmm.
It's described as being water lilies, but there's no species listed, and want to make sure that's not an invasive plant because there's some like water plants that are similar and have been called water lilies that have invasive tendencies. So want to just confirm what the species is. And if that is an invasive species, want to make sure that the removal of the material, the materials either staying on site or going to the invasive species dumpster at the dump.
I'm not sure they're white water lilies. I didn't check out the species of them. And I would agree, we would agree with that. Would either leave it on the site or put it in the digester at the landfill or in the invasive species dumpster.
Yeah, I mean, I see your original planting plan from early 1900s,
Mhm.
and a lot of the plants on here, the names have changed, or there's only a common name listed. There are some species here that would be there's definitely species that are in the same genus as species that are known on the invasive on the Massachusetts prohibited plant list, and if those specific names have changed in the last 100 years, it could be some of the same species that are actually on the prohibited plant list. So we need to make sure that before anything gets re-added or even removed, we need a updated 2019 effective plant list with both common and scientific names.
For what's going to be planted? Or-
Yeah, you're saying you want to replant some of the historic species,
Right.
just making sure those historic species, the scientific names are listed.
Okay. She had, I mean, Ms. Fader put the landscape plan together, and she has listed Cobber Beach and given the Latin name, and then, have you looked over the list on the plan?
Yeah, I looked at it, but I just saw that on the original plan there was other species not included. So if those species are going to be restored, making sure that we've been updated as to what they are.
So you're saying on the original?
On the original
Okay,
list, yeah.
what we're proposing to plant is what's on
Okay.
here.
Yeah, okay, I understand.
And then I guess my only other question is, you know, this pond, I don't know that we can put a fence up to deny access to wildlife.
Well, it's only this one section right in here. It's probably about 20 feet just to keep them from going in there. And it's just, would be like a to try to discourage them to not go in there
In
anymore.
that particular spot.
In that particular spot, because it's steep and it gets eroded down. If they came in a flatter area, it wouldn't be the same problem.
Yeah, but I guess, I mean,
So-
a fence is,
But it's only temporary until it gets established.
okay,
And it would only be in that one area. They can still come in all the way around we were out there with Jeff and Joe, and there were 3 on the others, right there.
Yeah.
3 deer right there.
So they're trampling it and then.
Yeah.
It's meant to be temporary to get it reestablished.
Okay.
And then the fence goes. I don't want to see a fence back there either.
okay. All right. Any other questions from the commission?
I'm a neighbor, may I make a comment?
Yes.
Is it now appropriate?
Yep, I was gonna open it up to the public, yep.
Hi, Lucy Dillon, 37 Liberty Street. I'm directly across. And I have to disclose I'm a member of the Land Council Board, but I am acting on my own. I look out over Marcia's yard, and it's a pleasure. It's probably the largest yard downtown in the historic district, and it's all organic. I see the deer there in the afternoons. It's lovely, and I'm not a botanist, so I can't make comments on her planting, but the years that I've lived across the street from Marcia, I can say that she has been a good steward of the land. So I fully support her plans. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the public?
Hi. My name is Greg, Greg Elder, and we lived in Marcia's land on the property for quite a few years. And I can speak to the maintenance of the pond. The pond was actually put in by some of our ancestors, and it's been man-made and always has been man-made. And the only way that we found through the years to maintain it was to physically take out the things that were inside it on a regular basis and keep the biology essentially going year after year. So I think that the removal of the lilies when they get a little too invasive or too overgrown is probably an extremely beneficial thing to the biota of the area and just keeping that pond going. So I just want to mention that because it's been a regular sort of maintenance routine that we did. My father did it and my grandfather did it. And I would also echo that the Marcia is just, she's been a wonderful steward since we sold the land to her in taking care of that land and maintaining it in its proper undeveloped state, which is what we really value. That's it.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the public? Commission, are we feeling good?
So I just wanted to put on the record, because it's been a question here. So we did review the wetland line with Mr. Haynes and Ms. Fader as well. We do agree with the line that's there. I would say in our inspection, in most recent inspection, the sections within the delineated vegetated wetland do include a pretty significant population of marsh pennywort in the lawn area that's there, which is not unexpected. We've kind of seen it on abutting properties as well. So, but certain times of year, you definitely would pick that up more than others. It's not as persistent as the lawn. So, but we do, looking at the soils, we do agree with the line that's shown on the plan, and feel that it's accurate.
I guess that makes me think of one more question. So when you're talking about putting up tents, are those generally out of the area that's wetland? Like I'm thinking of like tent floors and compaction.
It would not be in those wetland areas.
Okay, so it would be up closer to the house? The fence, the tents wouldn't be back?
No, and there would
Okay. So maybe we could just specify that in the conditions, that some of these extras stay out
Mhm.
of the,
Well, I mean, I think what you're saying, they wouldn't have floors, so there may be a tent put up out there, a temporary tent for a function, but is that what you're?
Yes, the last
But
time
no
that
floor.
happened was
Okay.
2005, when the Preservation Trust put a tent at the back, but it was just, there was no flooring, it was
okay,
in and out, and there was
Just
no
grass on
other
the-
equipment. I would never have even a car drive over
okay.
the property.
Okay. All right, so Commissioner, are you ready to close? Would you like to close?
We'd love to close.
Okay, is there a motion? All in favor?
Aye.
So that carries with Commissioner Golding and Steinhauer recused.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, we're moving on to Grant L. and Margaret C. Cambridge at 10 Medui Creek Road.
Madam Chairwoman, members of the commission, my name is Kevin Dale. I'm an attorney that represents Grant and Margaret Cambridge, the former owners of this property at Medui Creek Road. Before you is a notice of intent to approve certain structures located within the 50 and 25-foot buffer zones on the property, which have existed in their current location for almost 6 years. At the continued hearing on July 31st, certain commissioners raised concerns about the portions of the retaining wall that exist in the 25-foot wetland buffer zone, and also concerns about other structures in the 50-foot buffer zone. You were kind enough to continue the hearing until today to give my clients an opportunity to file a new plan, which they have done. This plan shows removal entirely of the retaining wall from the 25 and 50-foot buffer zones and regrading, so there's no more retaining wall. Further, it shows replication of plantings in the 25 to 50-foot buffer zone area. What's left on the plan in the 50-foot buffer zone is a small portion of a pervious parking area and also pervious bluestone steppers or walking stones. So my clients hope that this satisfies the concerns of the commission. I want to acknowledge and recognize Brian Madden from LEC Environmental, who's here. He really knows a lot more about this than I do. So if you have any questions, ask me or Brian.
Thank you. Any questions from the commission? No, I really appreciate this revamping of the plan.
Thank
So,
you.
Thank you.
Yes, I'd like to second that. I
Thank you.
really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you for the kind words.
All right. No questions? Okay, any questions from the public? All right, seeing as there are no questions, would you like to close?
I would like to close.
Do I have a motion? Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that
Thank you.
carries unanimously. Thank you. Okay, moving on to Gisela Leinhard at 11 Jonathan Way.
Hello, Jeff Blackwell for.
You might need to get
Mrs. Leinhart.
closer to that.
Closer? Okay. And also Joel Quick from Pierce Atwood, who is also here on behalf of Mrs. Leinhart. There were some questions, we had a continuance, so the last time we discussed this project was July 17th. And there was a request for some information which has been submitted. Water quality studies in 2014, 2018 of Town Members Pond, which were submitted as and developed in association with the Land Council. This plan is also submitted to respond to your request for a location of Tom Nevers Pond in relationship to the property. There was also a reference to a project that had been denied at 46 Walwinger Road some years ago. Similar in some ways, but very much different in others. That was a vacant property. It required waivers from the 2-foot groundwater offset, and it also required a waiver from the 100-foot setback between a septic system leach field and a bordering vegetated wetland. The difference, the significant difference at 46 Walnut Road is that the septic leach field was entirely surrounded by bordering vegetated wetlands, and was not able to, the applicant in that case was not able to demonstrate that there was no adverse impact to the location of the system less than 100 feet away from the wetland, even with enhanced treatment system. The difference here, the significant difference is we have a nice a wetland, a distinct wetland in the center of the property, and the leach field has been proposed to be located in the optimal location, which is not upgradient from the groundwater flow, or the system is not upgradient from the wetlands. So groundwater flow will take any remaining effluent contaminants in the effluent, not toward the wetland, but away from the wetland. And an enhanced treatment system, a septic tank system, is proposed for this project. Those are the main questions as I recall them. Additional information has been submitted in terms of, there's a question about groundwater studies. Groundwater in Nantucket has been extensively studied by 3 major studies that I'm aware of, starting the U.S. Geological Survey in 1980 published a study by Eugene H. Walker that has provided the groundwork for subsequent studies. And then in 1984, the Land Council commissioned a study by Perkins and Jordan, groundwater flow direction information consistent with the USGS study. And then in the most recent study is the 1990 Horsley Witten Hegeman study, which was also commissioned by the Land Council and was adopted by the Nantucket Board of Health as the basis for a section of the health regulations that govern the placement of wells and septic systems and the separations that are required to be maintained between the two. So we feel that the direction of groundwater flow has been studied with consistent results amongst 3 major studies. With the results of these studies, we are confident in our assertion that the waiver requirement to demonstrate no adverse impact has been met. The second requirement is no reasonable alternative. Well, with the optimal location of the leach field and the requirement to build an on-site septic system, there is no reasonable alternative to the placement of the system.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm Joel Quick. I'm here in Dan Bailey's stead. He apologizes for not being able to be here tonight. He had a doctor's appointment. It took him 6 weeks to get it, and he just unfortunately couldn't make it. I'm here to follow up. If you have any other questions, a letter was submitted on the 3rd you've all seen. And appended to the back of that was the plan from that other property. And it shows the direction of groundwater on that plan as well, and shows that it would be headed toward wetland resources, unlike the situation here. And as Jeff said, I think that the leach field is located as far away from all of the wetland resources as it reasonably can be, and given the groundwater flow direction, I believe that it won't adversely impact wetland resources. And it's not shown on this map, but as you can, if you're familiar with the area, you know that there are a number of residential properties on down and then below this. So this is really, the wetland resources are up in this area, the water flowing that way. We're also requesting the second waiver, having to do with the vertical distance between high groundwater and the bottom of the foundation in this instance. And given the soils on this site, which were set out on the third page of this plan, we think there's really no concern with the location of the foundation. It's going to be a crawl space under there, and as was stated in the notice of intent, if any water needs to be pumped out during the construction, it would go into a temporary infiltration area in the area of the leach field for that time, but that shouldn't at all be necessary in an ongoing manner, because the foundation will be above high groundwater. So, if the board has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Well, actually, this is a question for Jeff. And so when I went online to study how accurate groundwater measurement was, according to a USGS paper in 2011, accuracy of flow meters measuring horizontal groundwater flow in an unconsolidated aquifer simulator. Without going into detail, they said the mean error in direction measurements range from 15 degrees to 23 degrees. And so there's quite a bit about questioning how accurate these models are. And just one other, in the Journal of Geological Education from 2018, the limitations of groundwater models. It basically says that the ability of groundwater models to accurately predict the behavior of groundwater flow in real-world situations is poor. The best groundwater models, despite their high degree of precision, are qualitative predictors of future behavior, and so on and so forth. So, so I was wondering how, as a commission, we should look at how accurate these measurements really are.
Well, I'm not a hydrologist or a geologist. I would say to you that the thing that struck me about the three major studies is the consistency of the modeling of groundwater flow direction. And each of the studies became more and more specific, with the 1990 Horsley-Hageman study employing the greatest number of groundwater monitoring wells, surface monitoring, or ground penetrating radar data points. I can't tell you that there may not be a slight variation. 15 degrees is still, or 23 degrees is still not going to direct effluent from the proposed leach field toward the wetland. That would be, it would have to be a 90-degree variation from the groundwater modeling. But consistency above, amongst the three studies was striking.
Well, I would dispute that it would be 90 degrees, maybe to the head of the pond. But nonetheless, I wanted your opinion on that, so thank you.
Any other questions from the commission?
Yeah, just one.
Okay.
The only question I had in terms of the updated groundwater flow information that you've provided, I agree with what you're saying that it's going to flow, away from this wetlands on the property. But is there any like grade difference at the edge of the property where it might move overland or groundwater flow east towards Tom Nevers Pond, or is the grade pretty much the same there?
Well, the grade southerly of the property rises quite sharply. There's a pretty good little hill that comes up toward Sandsbury Road. Ground surface in general is higher on the properties southerly of Locust.
And is there a slope from west to east, or is it pretty much even across the southerly properties?
The slope would be gently toward Tom Nevers Pond, but of course the septic system effluent is subsurface, so there would be no overland flow directing contaminants toward Tom Nevers Pond.
Any other questions? Man, I think I'm concerned most that this requires 2 separate waivers on an undeveloped property. To me, I just don't know that we should be granting 2 waivers. I think it just screams that this shouldn't be developed. If the foundation's potentially within high groundwater and we have issues with the septic, I just think that makes me nervous.
I'm curious about the 2-foot separation, is that the footings or is that the actual bottom of the crawl space? Is there a cement slab that's within 2 foot?
Excuse me, based on the soil testing for the septic system, the bottom of the footing for the crawl space would be just about 1/10 of a foot above groundwater itself, but well within the 2-foot separation requirement, so, which requires us to ask for the waiver, but the footing would not be set in groundwater itself. So we don't anticipate having to pump to keep a foundation excavation or crawl space dry during the crawl space or the foundation installation.
I guess I have more trouble with things like pools and basements within 2 foot of high groundwater, where footings are relatively small, and on those occasions when groundwater may reach those footings, they're probably not going to obstruct flow because they're not a solid wall or a deep, large structure down there. So I don't have as much trouble with footings being within 2 foot as I do with
The slab.
the slab of some kind, or
This is not a habitable space that would have a sump pump or anything. If it's a crawl space, I have no problem with it. So, that's fine.
Did you consider putting the leach field anywhere else on the property, like on the eastern end, or did you feel that was too close to the pond?
The location that we chose maximizes the separation to the wetland. Anything further to the east, we would have much less separation to the wetland. It would be closer to Tom Nevers Pond, not that we're within the buffer zone of the pond, but given the location of surrounding private wells and the wetlands, this location is the best.
Okay, any other questions?
Ashley, I share your concern, because this is clearly, what you've done here seems to me is your best way of shoehorning some kind of dwelling into an area that would otherwise be too small if you, unless we were to grant waivers, this would essentially, unless you put in, I don't know if you put in a smaller home, or I'm not sure if anything really can be done in terms of making this less intrusive upon the nearby wetland. And I mean, that's really what concerns me, that in order to do this, it's two waivers, and Ernie, what you said, makes sense to me. But this is, it's really pushing the envelope, and that's a concern for me in terms of, this is, I mean, this is really, really, to my mind, at the edge of, and maybe beyond the edge of what makes sense to me to have as permanent structures in an area which is clearly, the wetland is determining what happens here, and this is going to, and these protections that we have are for, obviously they're for a reason, and adding a development here, adding this development here is a real concern for me.
Do you have a comment?
Yeah, may I?
Mm-hmm.
So this lot has been here for about 50 years.
Mhm.
And I think that this is the best we can do with this particular structure and this septic field. And I think, I don't think there's, possibly with the footings, but if that's not really a major concern, I don't think there's another way to do this. I don't think there's an impact on the resources, and I do think that this would, if these waivers, which we believe are reasonable, are not granted, I think that this property would not be usable, essentially. And so that's a, I would have to talk to my client, but I think that is a serious impact on my client, given the age of the lot and the location of, our efforts to try to do this to where there isn't an impact. I think essentially the property would be rendered valueless in this situation.
I'm just re-examining the location of the proposed structure and the proposed driveway, and as you've noted, the structure is between like 8.7 and 8.3 elevation, but if you go down farther where the top of the driveway is, it looks like you might be hitting 9.2 there. Is it possible to reduce the size of the driveway and move the house south to get a little bit more separation? Or is that not really
Well, the house,
possible there?
the house currently exceeds the 50-foot minimum setback to the wetland. It's the proposed porch that is shown is about 60 feet away, and then the body of the house itself is further distance away. It is a modestly sized house. It is not a mansion by any means. 28. The house footprint is shown as 28 by 36 with a 10-foot porch. We have separation requirements for zoning. There's a 35-foot separation along the street and a 20-foot separation requirement from the crawl space to the leach field. So for those, we couldn't place the house up there. The zoning board of appeals would never approve a waiver for that. So we try to tuck it into the rear corner where it's furthest from, gives us more than compliance from the minimum 50-foot setback.
One thing, you know, we sometimes in certain situations consider alternative technologies such as tight tanks, et cetera. I know the Board of Health doesn't like them and the state doesn't really like them except in certain circumstances. But we've never considered something like a composting toilet, which I know many of our sanctuaries use them, and they end up with basically a small amount of dry compost even in a public setting, you know, and I don't know why something like that would not work where, you know, the gray water could still go through the septic, but the black water could just be composted and then periodically hauled to the landfill and put in the composter. I mean, that comes out just like well-made compost. It doesn't smell. The toilets don't smell. They're not dirty. You know, it's not like you've got your bucket with sawdust in it, you know. I mean, these things are effective, and it makes a compost that's safe enough to put on gardens. So they're not nasty things. They're not traditional, but they'd be an alternative in a situation like this. I'd be much more comfortable if the black water wasn't going into a septic that's, you know, in the buffer. I don't have as much trouble with gray water. And that's, I don't know, Jeff, are those options, or is that just unrealistic according to the health department?
I would have to ask the health department, but it's definitely in their knowledge base, and not necessarily in mine.
I tried calling them and they never got back to me.
So,
Yeah, as far as I knew, I didn't think they allowed for like gray water separation systems. Last I checked.
You have to check to see whether they're allowed, DEP allows them for new construction. That would be the first question that comes to my mind. But we can look into that.
Is that something the commission would like more information about?
I mean, certainly if it's another alternative.
I mean, I do want to reiterate that this system is a system that's going to already have less nitrogen going into it. It is, I realize that there's a 100-foot buffer here, but the state minimum is 50 feet, so, and it's at least 30 feet beyond that. But we're certainly happy to look into that if that's something the commission's interested in.
Yeah, and I think part of our concern too with freshwater systems, it's really the phosphorus that's the limiting nutrient. And these systems don't cover that. So.
Yeah, I do see in the Land Council document that you referenced of Tom Nevers Pond, they indicated that phosphorus was seasonally high, which would indicate that this bordering vegetated wetland fairly close is probably phosphorus limited as well rather than nitrogen limited.
Well, of course, the Tom Rivers Pond is not within we're not within the buffer zone of the Tom Rivers Pond. I wondered about the phosphorus as well, and what I did is I took the 1990 Horsley Witten Hageman map, and one of the 5 maps that they created is a map that shows the contributing areas to the various ponds on the island. And so the second page will show
Thanks, Jeff.
The contributing area for groundwater to Tom Rivers Pond is directed directly through Phillips Run, and the watershed includes the cranberry bogs north of Milestone Road. I mean, I think if we're talking about phosphorus in Tom Rivers Pond, again, I'm not a hydrologist, but it seems to jump out to me that the agricultural use on the NCF property is a likely culprit.
But we can't add any more, so, you know. Any other questions or comments from the commission? Any questions?
Well, I think
Nope.
one thing to keep in mind, in our sandy soils, we just do not have the fine particles, the clays and the organic matter that absorb these things with distance. So I think, you know, Title V is kind of a meaningless concept on our soil, because that stuff is just gonna go, with rainwater, go down into the groundwater sooner or later, and there's probably very little horizontal interception of it anyway. So in some respects, I mean, I understand the buffers, but eventually that stuff's gonna get there anyway. It's just a matter of time in our case, I'm afraid. And I'm not a hydrologist, but that's just sort of what I've read and kind of seems sensible.
Well, Ernie, would that lend one to thinking more about a tight tank in this kind of situation? Is that, and I know they're not
I don't know
popular,
if it
but,
would be permitted.
So
but
just,
we have these unusual situations, and there's not, certainly not the only one that's in the plan. You know, I'm just wondering if we need to look into that.
so I can comment on that a little bit if it helps. The requirements for tight tank by Title V, you pretty much have to demonstrate that there's no other Title V feasible system that you can put on the lot. So under state regulations, this leach field needs to be located outside of the 50-foot setback from the wetland. So they would be able to demonstrate a state compliant system. So I don't believe DEP would really even consider a tight tank in a situation like this, just from our local regulation. They're pretty strict about that. So this is something too, I mean, thinking about in our permits, obviously, our standard for leach fields is different. So as we're hearing the application, keep in mind that you do have the ability to issue out permits and orders of conditions under the state and local separately, because you're hearing them both simultaneously. Typically, we issue them both at the same time, but you may get to a point where they are conditioned differently, to the point where it's there, or even a determination is made differently. So that's another tool for you guys. But I think having the applicant explore all feasible alternatives is something that the waiver requirement makes pretty clear is what needs to be done. Hopefully that's helpful.
Yes, thank you. Are there any questions from the public on this one? Yes.
Archie Turcotte, Nantucket Land Council. I'm just going to quote from the Nantucket Water Resources Management Plan that was added to the packet. And the results, according to this analysis, existing nitrogen levels in the Long Pond and Tom Nevers contributing areas are already above 5 milligrams a liter, primarily due to the presence of the active and closed landfills within these areas. And then the other thing I'm going to read is Table 29, the Village Planning and Water Resources Protection Options. And for Tom Nevers Village area and the water resource area, specifically management option number 1 is to limit growth in the contributing area. And this is a classic case of that. As Commissioner Golding mentioned, as much as we'd love for these groundwater studies to be pinpoint accurate, they are not. It's capillary action and a lot of other things going on. It's very general. It's very ballpark. And the ballpark is that this effluent is going to flow southeast. And one way or another, it's going to hit this wetland and Tom Nevers Pond area, which is already nutrient stressed on phosphorus, which I had mentioned before, as well as nitrogen. And so we believe that this is just not an area for a leach field. It would be a dangerous thing for the commission to grant this one after the commission denied 46 Wawanit, because 46 Wawanit's applicants could not prove that this would have an adverse impact on the resource area. They cannot prove that this won't have an adverse impact on the resource area. We just don't know. And this system is already at its nutrient limit, possibly beyond it, as Jeff mentioned, because of the cranberry bogs. And the IA system, while it's excellent, is not better than not having the leach field there. And again, it does not address the phosphorus issue. So as far as we're concerned, this is just not a good area for this leach field.
Thank you.
I have a follow-up question for the applicant. I understand that these microfast IA systems are primarily designed to limit nitrogen intake. Do technologies exist on the market that target nitrogen and phosphorus, or is that not really something that exists?
There is a system called Phosrid that is, I believe, I'm only aware of 3 of them on the island, and I will tell you that my memories of Phosrid are very negative. In one of the systems failed entirely within a year or two. Even after some 15 years, they are only still in a piloting mode, which is a piloting type approval from DEP. General use approvals are the gold standard for systems that have demonstrated reliability and effectiveness. I would have a very hard time recommending a technology that has not done well here on the island, and there's very few of them in the state. Again, we don't have a freshwater body here on the property. Tom Numbers Pond is not within, it's some 200 to 300 feet to the east, and I would say we have 3 authoritative studies, and we can't just ignore the results of 3 studies and say, they're consistent in their conclusions, and say, well, they don't mean anything. They do mean something. I mean, any reasonable person would say we have to largely give them some credence, a large degree of credence.
Yeah, I think one thing I would have to say, if those studies showed that water was gonna run right to that pond, we would buy the study, we would agree with it. And I think we have to not, disagree with the study just because we may not, agree with what it's, what we'd like it to say. Because I know it a lot of times up in Wawinut, we've used similar studies to show that, that the groundwater is probably flowing to the ocean, not to the interior wetlands, and we've used those studies, and we have relied on them in the past.
Yeah, I mean, we need to be evidence-based. So if these studies have some degree of error to them, but 3 consistent studies show generally the same thing, it's my opinion that we should generally follow them.
Yeah. I would still like to see some of the alternatives we've
Yeah.
talked about.
We'll look into that.
Yeah.
Sure. We can hold the hearing open.
Are there any other questions? So would you like a continuance then for
please.
2 weeks?
Yes, please.
Okay, so this will continue until September 11th.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, make sure Jeff gets one.
Is that, Jeff, do you need that?
Yep, I'll take those. Thank you, guys.
Okay, so we're moving on to Lottie Leshley QPRT and Jan Leshley QPRT at 65 Squam Road. It's on page 520 of the packet if you need to flip ahead.
For the applicant, Arthur Gasparo, Nantucket Engineering. This is the second public hearing with the notice of intent for the small addition and a couple of decks in the buffer zone to the vegetated wetland. There were some questions in comments at the first hearing, so I have provided a supplemental letter and revised plan for your consideration to try to address those concerns, which I'd like to briefly review. First, I have labeled the square footage of each of the features on the plan for the decks and for the addition. We have added mitigation plantings to replace existing lawn area along the edge of the wetlands at twice the area of the proposed structural elements. And then we have specified on the plan that the deck boards would have a minimum gap spacing of at least of 1/8 of an inch to allow water to go through and be broken up and not have a sheet flow off of any one side of that. And then added another note to the plan, which I presume would also end up as a condition in the order, that any of the elements that the proposed decks that it would be approved could not be converted to interior space. And with that, I hope that we have addressed the questions and concerns that had been raised, and we have received a file number. I'd be happy to address any other questions you might have.
Thank you. Any questions from the commission? I definitely appreciate the mitigation plantings. Questions from the public? Okay, Jeff, do we have everything we need to close?
Yes.
Art,
do,
would you
Madam
like
Chair.
to close?
Yes, please.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Carries unanimously. Thank you. We're moving on to 115 Baxter Road LLC and 117 Baxter Road LLC at 115 and 117 Baxter Road.
Two of us will stand. Once again, for the applicant, I'm Jeff Sparrow from Nantucket Engineering, along with attorney Stephen Cohen. We're before you tonight with a notice of intent application for the relocation of an existing pre-78 structure within the buffer zone to the eroding coastal bank. I believe many of you, everyone should be aware of the setting. This is the essentially the last house on the east side of Baxter Road before you reach Sankaty Lighthouse. The applicant had acquired the vacant lot next door and is proposing to relocate the structure to attain maximum compliance, maximum separation distance possible from the top of the bank. Further to that extent, we have requested or in the process of working towards obtaining a license from the county commissioners in order to have a portion of the structure be located within the Baxter Road road layout. And that's similar to what had been done a couple of properties down a few years back. And the idea is that we would place the structure within a portion of the road layout where there are not current municipal services and not the paved road, so there's no impact on the public interest there, which is perhaps a little outside of your purview, but in establishing the overall project and demonstrating that we are essentially going over and above to get as far as we can away from the bank with this structure. We've also been to the zoning board of appeals for the location of the structure, both within the front zoning setback and actually over the property line. The other two aspects of the project is that I did file a supplemental letter to clarify that we would like to use the sand material from the excavation of the foundation to push it over the top of the bank. It's not a very large amount of sand, but you know, we hope that any bit there might help buy a little bit of time. So we have asked for permission. We believe that the material is going to be compatible, you know, with the bank and the beach, given such close proximity as part of the same landform. And then finally, we are requesting that the existing foundation would be maintained so that the top of the bank isn't destabilized or disturbed by removing that. And the applicant would like to put just a deck on top of that foundation, waterproof that, and hopefully have a few more years of use. And then that could be, you know, much more easily removed actually threatened to no longer be stable from the erosion, whereas we can't wait for the house to get to that same point. You know, we can't be able to relocate the house, but we could disassemble a deck. So she's hoping that she'd still be able to have some use of that for, you know, the limited amount of time that would be there. And again, we feel that, you know, removal of the foundation is going to sort of leave an area there that is going to be more likely to erode as the bank retreats. And with that, we'd be happy to try to address questions or concerns that you may have with the application.
Any questions from the commission?
Just a comment that this is the kind of thing we like to see, is to move back as far as they can first. And then Art, is the bank already bare? I mean, is it, or is it not vegetated? So it won't hurt to dump the sand over, really,
Right.
so.
So I fully agree with that, and I so appreciate moving this structure. I don't agree with putting a waterproof deck on the current foundation. I think there's already problems with runoff and water on this road, and it essentially, I don't know, it doesn't sit well with me for developing or moving a house to a lot that probably is too close to a bank, and then still keeping essentially the structural footprint on the other lot.
I think it's gonna make a mess trying to take it out and destabilizing what's left of the bank.
Do you fill it?
Yeah, you'd
Yeah,
fill
you
it, and
fill
then
it,
as
fill
it
it,
exposes, you remove it. Just,
Oh,
we
they're
have,
trying to keep it, you're trying to put stuff in it and
No, seal it.
just seal it, cap it.
Cap it, yeah.
and
Cap
then
it and
use it for
'cause
storage.
there's a garage
I get
that
it.
enters from the road.
Mhm.
So she would have essentially some interior storage space, maintain the garage use
Even the
that,
garage
that's
use,
there, right?
Got it.
And if I may,
Misunderstood.
to the one comment, if stormwater runoff was a concern, we could add some, infiltration chambers. You'll notice that the grades fall from the top of the bank back to the road. So I don't believe that the runoff from either the house or the deck is gonna adversely affect the bank. But in terms of adding to the road, we could certainly, put in some, you know, infiltration chambers and, collect that water, come up with some sort of a gutter system and or, just determine the low point and put in, a small, catch basin and infiltrate that water.
Yeah, I think that would be
Are you talking about
necessary.
the new house or the existing area or both?
I think that what would make the most sense to handle both would be in the southwest corner of the property, adjacent to the road is the lowest spot, so we could pick up probably all, you know, any water that would be coming from our site and then work to infiltrate that.
Okay.
So, when this property is moved, is it going to be claimed that both the foundation that was capped and where it's been relocated is going to be afforded pre-78 protection?
Good point.
That house is from, I believe, 1940, and I suppose the answer is it's not before us.
Okay.
Well, my opinion would be, you know, if it's a pre-78 house and it's being moved further away, even if it's on an adjacent lot, I would say the house would maintain the protection, but I agree with that question, is I don't think we can have it both ways. Any new house that went on the other lot would be post-78, it'd be a new house.
Right, and I don't want to be then protecting something structural, which is just a deck over a garage later down the
The
line.
deck's a new structure.
Yeah, I
So
just,
it's post-78.
yeah, well, it just makes me uncomfortable. Like, I would like to see them try and remove as much of that foundation as they can.
You wouldn't be comfortable just putting in our findings that this is,
Well, this did come up with the houses that have been moved across to the west side of Baxter Road, whether or not they were entitled to protection, even though they were pre-78, but they'd been moved. And town council, I don't think, ever actually gave an opinion. So,
I mean, I do think that the house's protection, structure's protection is not dependent on it remaining in its existing location. The statute says that it applies to structures and alterations thereof. And the bylaw, your bylaw, neither the statute nor the bylaw deal with relocation as an issue. But I think, Ian, your question really is, does a foundation, is that enough of a structure to maintain pre-78 protection? You know, frankly, I think that's a legal question outside of this situation here. And as I think Ernie said, it's also something you can condition.
So I'll just add into that because it's obviously something that's come up and we've talked about a lot. So DEP and their guidance for relocations in pre-78 structures really relates to the idea of you can maintain your pre-78 status as a relocation as long as you're moving further from the resource area. If you take a pre-78 structure and move it closer, you can actually lose that pre-78 status in their eyes. So that's what prevents, you know, me from renting my pre-78 shed that I have in the middle of the island to someone out there because it's moved closer. So that's typically how they viewed it. They try to keep it on kind of a lot by lot basis as much as possible, understanding that that's not always the case. But I think in this case where those two lots are kind of held together at this point, DEP would view this relocation as the house maintaining its status. And then I think you could have the discussion about the foundation, but I would say that you could simply have a finding that calls that a new structure, considering it's a complete change in use and structural element that's there if you really wanted to do it.
Is that foundation within the 50 foot and therefore it can't have a structure put on it?
Right.
Say that again?
Oh,
It's well within.
Yeah, well,
foot?
it's
Yeah.
within 10 feet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, then it can't have a structure. I mean, it's too close. It
Right.
wouldn't-
That's what
yeah,
I'm worried about.
Yeah.
Is essentially it's allowing structure in two places that we wouldn't have it. Like I can understand moving the house over and then having this lot be vacant, but essentially we're gonna have two lots that are developed that shouldn't be within our regulations.
So the goal is to create as little disturbance next to the closest, you know, the hottest spot on the lot in terms of erosion, and to, if possible, preserve some usable aspect of that structure. But I get your point that you wouldn't normally approve anything in that location.
Right, and we will have a stormwater issue that will then need to be infiltrated off of that lot. This is the part that makes me uncomfortable. The house move, I'm all for.
Yeah, me as well. And I see kind of being uncomfortable both ways, because if we do allow the waterproof deck capping, that would be a new structure. It would be a significant improvement. But if we didn't allow that, then we have essentially a garage which has potentially livable space in it. I mean, it's a garage. It's not really a livable structure, but we almost have two pre-78 structures now with the imagine taking a house, cutting it in half, the first floor and the second floor. You put the first floor on one lot and the second floor on you kept it on the same lot. Now you have two pre-78 structures on two different lots. You created two protectable lots when you only had one. So,
So these lots are actually merged, so it's one lot
Okay.
now.
right, because I'm correct in saying, Steve, that there was a house there that was moved on the west side, right? I don't have the facts in front of me.
The lot
but-
that's shown here as vacant was moved across the street, which was previously, I believe, the Stephen Cohen lot, not me. But he actually passed away.
Right.
But yeah, I believe you're right, Ian, that the house that was there was a much larger house that was moved.
Right.
Not directly across the street, but I think it's one over.
How close are we to the edge of the bank with the current structure?
7, 8 feet.
7 or 8 feet. And how much would you need? So the bank starts to go, we need to get that foundation out. How much room would you need?
I would say that it could typically be removed when it's essentially almost exposed, usually, from the backside, because it has, there's rebar in the concrete, or there's some support. It usually, so it could be almost probably right to it.
Yeah,
If it was going to be demolished and removed from the backside.
okay.
But that's not the same for moving the house, which is why we're at a critical
Right.
point.
poured concrete foundation or the same?
I think it's cinder block.
Cinder block.
Yeah, that's what I
Yeah,
thought.
so it's be more the footing you'd have an issue with. That's
What's
fine.
on the bottom? Is it a cement floor?
Yes, it's a slab.
See, so that would not, I thought if it was just soil, they could just have a non-waterproof deck and let it leach through the ground, but can't do that unless they punch a bunch of holes in it, which doesn't make sense, I guess.
No.
You'd have to cut it out.
Yeah.
No leaching.
These are interesting questions.
Mm-hmm.
So the house moves and we have a slab then exposed.
It's a full
Yeah,
basement,
it's
right?
a full basement,
Yeah.
yeah. Because it's built into the hill, from the street side, you can drive in, and from the backside, it's up at the roof side. It's exposed at the top on the back, but it's a substantial structure. It's not just a big pit.
Any other questions from the commission before I
Thank
open
you.
it up?
So here's the first floor, so you can see the garage and everything here is all the exposed foundation.
Thank you.
Any questions from the public?
RJ Turcott, Nantucket Land Council. We have absolutely no issue with the house being moved. It's obviously in a dangerous position right now. But as far as building another structure in that very same position of danger, it just doesn't really make sense. We would recommend, instead of pushing all the stuff excavated for the new foundation over the edge, to fill the old foundation, or better yet, to remove that foundation before it becomes a liability while there's still bank to work to remove that structure. And that's it.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay.
Burton Balgun for the Coastal Conservancy, and we support this kind of moving structures away from the bank instead of building walls in front of it, and just wanted to don't have an opinion on the foundation as much, but I did see over at the beach club, the Sankaty Beach Club, when their foundation had actually partly crumbled in, and they were able to remove the part that didn't crumble, and they were able to take the parts that did off the beach. Little different bank system there, but they were able to actually, an endangered, a foundation that was tilted over the bank, they were able to remove the part that was tilted. So I've seen it done before out here, so I don't know if that helps in your decision making, but I've seen it done. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public? Okay. I mean, I know that the way this stands with the waterproof decking, I'm not comfortable with it.
I think that has to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hadn't realized that there was this slab also, so we would have this big impervious surface and exposed. So, I mean, I think removing all of that structural stuff would be the best for the resource area, given how endangered it is already.
Would you like to comment?
If I could just say something as my house.
Yeah.
Jill Kelly. My house is really high up, the cliff, and the basement is very, in the middle of it. So if you took it out, it will collapse. The only reason why the erosion happened the way it is right now is because the irrigation company put the irrigation in incorrectly. and it collapsed right there. That's why there's a lot of erosion. But because it's thankfully a very deep basement in it's not like 110 feet high cliff, it's actually stabilizing it. So by removing it is actually going to, damage a bluff. And I don't feel like, hurting nature, letting a bluff collapse is good for a bluff for many reasons. My thought was, if you preserve the structure, and I'm not saying like to build another house, I barely can afford to even keep this one, even though and I'm gonna be honest, I got it at a very good price. And that's what we can afford. We're not, like our neighbors. But the reason why I say that is because the garage, the way it is street level, even as a garage. You don't drive down, you drive street level. It's literally what my neighbor's first floor is. So that way, because I have kids, and we could pull the car in, and it's not going to be right at the street, so there's no danger there. Just basically capping the top, because the first most important thing is keeping the structure, because the structure, if it was taken out, it would actually destabilize the bluff. So just keeping what's there, not breaking it, because you don't want to disturb the bluff. But just, and I know that we did some research and it's never been brought before. So, it's not like, oh, the last person asked that and we said no. It's never been brought before. So my point is, I'm not building anything on it, just basically capping it, because it is, like a walk-up level. I mean, it's not even walk-up, I'm sorry, it is street. And I took pictures today because it is, it's like my neighbors, it's actually their first level. So, just put any kind of, rather than just falling into a hole, just put any kind of top, so that way the car can go there and the kids' bikes, just something like that. And even if you want to do like some of it, not all of it, I'm obviously negotiable and flexible. I just want to be, say that, if that can help.
How big
Thank
is
you.
this area that would be maintained as a pit?
You mean the ground level?
Well, yeah, how big is we're talking, what's the?
1,300 square feet.
So it's not tiny.
No,
It's not, no. It's currently a one-car garage as well as the basement mechanical area. It's not finished, right? It's
No, it's not
There's no habitable space, there's no bathroom, there's no anything like
Nothing.
that, and there's no application to convert it into,
Right.
habitable space.
Right, we're not like living there. It's not livable space. It's just, just to basically seal it and make it safe. That's all. And to your question about like water runoff, it doesn't happen right now, so wouldn't be any difference. But Art had great, recommendations. I wouldn't mind that at all.
When did you buy this property?
4 years ago.
4 years ago.
I think at the minimum, we'd need to find that this basement garage area doesn't classify as a structure. And I personally understand what you're saying about the storage, but am not comfortable with having the decking on top of it. I think there's
Do
a
you have
possibility to
suggestion?
have the storage remain without a waterproof decking.
Well, I mean, do you have a suggestion on how, like, I just said, like, waterproof, just like basically a top, to keep it protected. That's all. I mean, it doesn't have. It could be. I'm like mendable, whatever it's not going to be livable or anything like that. It's just whatever you suggest is. Don't mind any suggestions.
Yeah, it's not my field of expertise, but I think there might be alternatives that are reasonable to that.
So you mean like a green roof, or you?
Yeah, something like that. Like some vegetative cover or green roof, or something to deal with the runoff or rain flow in that area.
I mean, I guess if you put a green roof on there, it would be a little bit more palatable, but my issue is it's still putting new structure essentially where we wouldn't allow it. Because the decking or whatever would hold the green roof is considered structural, under our regulations. And I know it's a difficult loss, but I would rather see it, if it can't be removed right now, then, filled with whatever comes out of this foundation and removed as it's exposed.
I think if you're gonna fill it, you'd have to take the bottom out so it just didn't become totally waterlogged. And
Yeah,
that would be so much weight up there at that point, you know, if that thing
Right.
filled up with water in big storms, and
Oh, so removing the
you'd
concrete
have to take,
slab.
you'd have to take the
Yeah.
slab out of the bottom
Inside.
at least, yeah, but I can see keeping the walls up to
Yeah.
not have a, you know, unsupported hole
collapse.
in the ground,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, if you keep the walls up, you're gonna have to put a deck on it to stabilize them. They're gonna wanna cave in.
Yeah,
That's
and
what,
they're-
that's what
and
the,
they're-
That's
and they're a
that's what,
danger.
that's what the first floor does. It spreads the foundation.
So,
Yeah, but we come up against a new structure within the 50-foot, we just wouldn't allow it. So it really, you know, there's separate issues, I would say, Dave.
Can I say, I don't think it's a structure, because a structure, in my opinion, is something you're living or using. It's just,
under our regulations, it qualifies as a structure.
well, what would not qualify as a structure, just like as a cap?
The patio that you have is non-structural if it's impervious or pervious.
So how about if we
excuse
just
me.
make it, like, I guess, is that what you meant by green top?
A green roof helps absorb, but I think it's still structural.
Like I said, this has never been brought before, and that's why it's,
Mhm.
that, well, I mean, in a weird way, I think that's a good thing, because you're not like, you know, making changes from a past, if this has been presented before. There's no more left, obviously, on Baxter Road, so it's not, you know.
Mhm.
But, if, you know, even if we did a green roof, anything, I just, you know, just more importantly, keeping that stabilized. Because it's really in deep, so it's really
Mhm.
stabilizing to bluff.
Well, if they infiltrate the water, I know it would be a structure in the 50, but if we, you know, condition it that, you know, it's not pre-78 and there, you know, would not qualify for additions, or, I know that's hard to, you know, you can't put limits on future commissions. So all that gets pretty tricky too.
Yeah,
What's the erosion rate of this bank? I mean,
Yeah, it's pretty fast, it's not gonna be.
But I don't mind if you put that in, that would make sense, you know, the conditions.
Well,
I mean,
I'm
if-
not sure that putting in our idea of what what a pre-1978 structure is and our conditions is really kind of the way to go. I mean, I think it really is, you know, as you said, I think it's a legal issue. And so this, you know, as we're talking about it, it kind of seems it's, you know, I think we're kind of looking at something that's almost all or nothing, you know, that either we accept something getting added to something that's already there, or we say, you know, remove the whole kit and caboodle because it's within the resource area, we wouldn't otherwise
Right.
allow it.
Mhm.
And I would lean to the latter
Right.
of those two things. And you know, I understand the applicant's concerns, and, you know, I feel for you, but I think it would make more sense to remove that.
David, if they just took the floor out, the concrete floor, so it had more ability to percolate, and then filled it with the sand from the other site, would the walls be stable then, or would they
They
still
could
not?
take some of the floor out.
Yeah.
You'd wanna leave a little bit of it to keep the toe of the walls from moving and
Yeah,
stuff,
you have
but
the
you
toe
could
of
get
it,
it so
yeah.
that it could pass water.
'Cause I mean,
Cut
Well,
cut a hole in the center.
Yeah, remove some of that.
I mean, if that's what I have to do.
So maybe there's a way to play Solomon and the baby here, which is that if we were to remove the part that is the closest to the cliff, which is gonna be the first part that is exposed, and just keep the much smaller piece that's currently the garage, it would have potentially, like. So fill this.
where, so is that,
So if you look
Keeping
at
this
if you
part?
look at the piece where the garage is, it's actually got a pretty decent distance. But
so they
but the
remove
base- so
that
either
and
remove
just keep
this
that,
Or
yeah.
fill it and just keep this and cap it.
They're talking about just
Then she gets a garage, we'll cap it,
Could
and,
you pass it over, Ash?
Then you have
Yeah.
some space to put some infiltrators.
and normally, if I may, Madam Chair,
Just
I would ask to continue the hearing and provide a revised plan and work it out, but we are in a situation of, you know, hopefully trying to get a building permit as soon soon as possible. So, if it were to be amenable to the commission, you know, I could mark on the plan the line, and that would be an initial, and if that would work with you and with Jeff, and that would become the plan of record, if that was something that you would find a way, you know, that may be approvable. But I think it's basically the red line, that basically what you just did on the plan would be the thought. And I think you can see, as Stephen mentioned, that the distance to the bank in front of that portion of the structure is much greater than the rest of it.
So then would you need to add a wall here?
Yeah, we just add a block wall inside,
Yeah.
which would be pretty straightforward.
Yeah, and then if they have to, they just take it block by block and take it out.
Right.
Would the applicant be willing to do a green roof on the portion that's gonna stay above the garage instead of the deck as well, or do you still want the deck and removing the rest of the part?
The green roof could get very complicated and
Structure.
expensive.
Yeah, sure.
Versus just doing a deck, and then you have conditions.
I also think that the HTC might have a problem with it, since
Yeah.
Right, we still have
there
to
is
go back
zero
to
on
that.
Nantucket.
Yeah.
You know, like, I think they look great,
Yeah.
but I'm not an HTC.
Okay.
They weren't around in 1850. you
We
know.
got it.
Would you be all right as well with a condition that, you know, when the bank gets a certain distance from this remaining part, that it's, you know, an automatic removal?
Like 5 feet.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, because obviously there's been years when a lot gets lost very quickly. And so one doesn't wanna have a situation where you've got,
And like I said, that erosion isn't natural. It was basically from malpractice, you know. And you know, it's not like, yeah, so it's, yeah, I don't mind
It was,
that.
it was enhanced.
Yeah, unfortunately.
so I think that I would agree to a condition like that.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's a practical consideration anyway, you don't wanna get to zero.
Yeah, I mean, if you're saying that the closest section is about 7 or 8 feet, then where this garage is gonna stay is maybe 10 or 11 feet
No, it's much further,
away.
it's really wide.
Sort of back in.
You still considering putting something in for water management?
I think
Runoff
that probably
management.
wouldn't be needed at the smaller
Not
size
here,
now,
but
right?
you were talking about something for the main house.
I was talking about it to try to alleviate if you were gonna have 1,300 square feet of deck, and there was a concern for runoff, but, I don't think that there's really much of a change where it's a much smaller portion of the structure now. And again, in terms of wetland protection interests, the runoff is going to the road
To
and
the
not
road.
to the resource area, so.
The road ultimately goes to the resource area though here, doesn't it, with the street drainage that goes down?
Well, yeah, the only drain is the one
Yeah.
that's down, you know, south of 99 Baxter. So again, if that was something you felt strongly about, then we could look at doing that.
Well, I'm still puzzled. So you're saying that you're going to keep the garage, you're going to add a wall, and then you're going to put a roof or a deck on it.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. I'm not in favor of that approach. So you know, I think if you want to move the house, that's one thing, but when you move the house, I don't think we should be setting the precedent of having new construction within the 50 like this.
I have to say, I agree with Ian, I appreciate the reduction, and I'm not sure the other commissioners might go for it, but I would like to see the revised plan showing that before we would approve, would be my feeling, to just have that clear in our record. Any,
I agree, we need an updated plan showing that.
okay. Any other questions or comments from the commission?
Madam Chair,
You guys are trying to get a building permit. Is there a way we condition it and you come back with another application, or do you just wanna say, wait 2 weeks? Or the
Well,
next
I'll be
meeting?
fair in saying I did not draft an order for this project, given the new pieces in complexity. I would also say too that, you know, DEP, current guidance from them kind of recommends that anything that's a notable plan change be provided prior to closing the hearing to make sure that the plan is what is expected. I appreciate that I was gonna draw it tonight and initial it
I asked.
is I think that's different, but I think that their fear is, I think they've seen it a bit, is they close the hearing based upon comments for a revised plan, and the revised plan that comes in doesn't necessarily depict what they thought it was going to, and then they're renoticing hearings and doing things. I think that's been a little problematic Commonwealth-wide, where it's come up. I think it's easier just to do that, but we could certainly talk about in order to do it at the next hearing, for sure.
Okay, so I think because we're not gonna get an order tonight either way, we might as well just hold it open. So we, you know. Provide a revised plan.
Okay. So,
Provide a revised plan.
so you'd like to continue until September 11th?
Yes.
Okay.
Can I ask one more question
With that.
before we close it?
We're not gonna close
Before
the hearing yet.
hearing's closed? I just wanted Burton Balk, and I want to know if this property is covered by the expansion, the proposed expansion of the geotubes? It is. Okay, thank you.
All right. September 11th. Okay, perfect. So,
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
okay, moving on to Nantucket Property Trust, 13 Hallowell Lane.
So this one was continued last time, Madam Chairman. We were waiting for comments from National Heritage on this one, which we have received. Their comments were related to the potential breeding habitat for pheasant plover, essentially. So it had their typical time of year restrictions and some of the other things that were included in their letter. But that was the last piece of information that we've been seeking on this one.
For the applicant, Art Gasparo, Nantucket Engineering, and I'm also here on behalf of Lee Wisher from the Woods Hole Group, who prepared I prepared the plan, he prepared the application, and he also provided a letter to you in response to some of the comments from the first application that had to do with the sand nourishment. And so his August 21st letter, and you had asked the question about the mean high water line, and the land court line. So we had studied that, and essentially I think that kind of came out at the hearing, the first hearing, but we memorialized it in the letter that they were essentially coincident, the new one's slightly seaward of the 1933 line. So there's some real evidence of stability of the beach in that area.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the commission? No. Questions from the public? Okay, so Jeff, we have everything we need to close?
Yes, please.
Would you like to close? Okay, do I have a motion?
Move to close.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, that carries unanimously. Thank you. Okay, moving on to Salon Elves LLC at 3 Wires Way. Are we doing lot A and B together or separate?
If you'd like to, you can ask the applicant if they want to do both at the same time
Okay.
or do them separately.
Would you like to hear them both at the same time?
I'll get up.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
We'd like to hear about this.
okay,
Yeah.
so 3 Wires Way, lot A and lot B.
Yeah. So Stephen Cohen here with David Haynes for the applicant, and I'll let David talk about the material aspects of the application, but I do want to bring to your attention something that was just brought to our attention yesterday, which is that there's some potential question as to whether or not Wires Way is a road or not. Filing the notation by the Land Council and the Land Bank is that in fact the access point for this lot and another lot that's been used for 60 years is actually land owned by the Land Bank and not a private road as, you know, it's been used. We don't need to get into that, we don't need to discuss it, we don't need to resolve it, you don't need to care about it, you don't need to take a position on it. But it brings into question whether or not there are rights to improve it or not, right? So if it's not owned by my clients, they don't have the right to improve it, obviously, and they don't have the right to then apply for permits to deal with it. So, for purposes of this application, we just want to stick to the four corners of the lot, or I guess under lots A and B, there's more than four corners, but you get the idea. So anything that's outside the actual property of Three Wires Way for purposes of this application, we would consider not before you today. And we've also agreed with the land bank that we will not close tonight, so that there's at least one more hearing. So if anything needs to be corrected or adjusted in the record, that there's time to do that. So those are my 2 points. But we still would like you to discuss the jurisdictional and regulatory issues of the actual merits of the application for anything within the bounds of the lot, but not including anything outside the bounds of the lot, and not, you don't need to address the rights in the road issue or rights in the lot issue. And we definitely won't close tonight. We're definitely going to continue to the September 11th meeting to allow for anything that needs to be addressed. So is that sort of clear for everybody? All right, I'll let David.
Sort of. Yeah.
Yeah. But at the close of the last meeting, again, David Haynes for the applicant. At the close of the last meeting, there were basically 3 issues I thought that were still on the table that the commission wanted addressed and needed addressed. One was a revision of the invasive species protocol methods, suggestions made by Mr. Steinauer, Dr. Steinauer, to maybe improve our protocol. And so what we've done, I've put a new protocol together where I've incorporated, instead of just using glyphosate, but to use triclopyr in the beginning of the season, and then glyphosate at the end of the season. Also to go in, and we're not going to dig out the area anymore and have a bunch of soils with a bunch of roots in them. We are just going to mow down the knotweed at the end of the season, making sure that when they mow it, they spray it away from the wetland, not towards the wetland. That way we don't end up with any waste that has to go to the landfill or the composter or anything. And then all other aspects were the same. We're going to then replant the vegetative buffer with high bush arrowwood, high bush blueberry, sweet gale, Virginia rose, groundsel tree, swamp azalea, inkberry, and plugs of Joe pieweed. And all that remains basically the same. And then establish a meadow buffer as well, using fescue and top dressing. The other issue that came up was what were the ground. We are still asking for a waiver for the 2-foot separation to the water table, and the commission was concerned or had questions about what the water table was. There is a temporary monitor well that was put in there probably during the winter, and in our report that we've submitted, we have some elevations that were recorded. The bottom of the foundation will be at elevation, the bottom of the footing will be at elevation 14, where the top of the slab of the monopore is at elevation 15. Back in February, the end of February, there was an elevation of the water table that was 14.54, making the footing slightly within the water table. The 18th of July, it was at 14 even. 7th of August, it was 13.7, and 12th of August, it was at 12.96, or about 13 feet. So about a foot below the actual where the footings were. What we're planning on doing is doing the work at a time of the year when the water table is low, so we don't have to dewater. We'd like to do it in the fall coming up. But the top of the footings and part of that mono slab would be in the water table during high water tables. I also dug an auger hole right next to the observation well and went down about 4 feet before I started hitting silty layers. Everything above that was permeable, so there will be about 3 feet of permeable soil beneath the footings to allow groundwater to flow underneath the buildings. and I'm assuming I did not hit, I hit a silty layer. I did not hit the clay layer that I was expecting to see, but when you have only a 4-foot auger, you only dig a 4-foot hole. So there is water, there is soil beneath the footings. We are adding 2 feet of material around the, on the site to try to minimize how deep those footings are. And we are still, the groundwater, all of this will not impact the groundwater that enters the wetland because it will still flow either beneath or around the footings. So I still feel strongly that there is no impact to the wetland resource area by putting the footings just barely into the water table. The other issue was the area between the 25 and the 50. We were altering more than 50% of that. We have realigned the driveway. We had previously been altering only leaving 20% remaining. We have realigned that driveway, pulled it up, and we are now altering 36%. It's still not 50%, but we are asking for a waiver based on the fact that we are replanting, we are removing 735 square feet of invasive species, and we are converting 1,690 square feet of lawn into a natural vegetative buffer. The removal of invasive species and the establishment of a natural buffer will greatly improve the vegetative biodiversity and the nesting cover and food sources of wildlife, and will also reduce thermal shock of runoff into the wetland. So for those reasons, we are saying we are providing a net benefit. We're asking for the waiver. The waiver to the water table we are asking for, saying that no reasonable alternative. We put in 2 feet of fill and we brought everything up, but it also will not alter, have any adverse effects on the wetland resource areas. That's basically my presentation.
Any questions from the commission?
Sure. So, David, you read the Land Council's,
Yep.
Yes. So, do you feel its alternatives analysis is inaccurate?
Well, we weren't asking for the alternatives for the footings. Basically, it does slope up slightly to 16.3 from 15.5, so we would still be within 2 feet of the water table if we were trying to build these houses farther up the hill. That was one of their alternatives, and we can't get away from the water table on this property.
It'd be better, though.
It could be slightly better, but my contention is there's no impact. I mean, the whole reason for the 2 foot separation to the water table, I'm not sure who was on the commission at the time, and it was it was a very good reason. There was an incident off of Squam Road where somebody was digging a cellar hole, and they had groundwater, and they just started pumping, and they pumped it out and across the street, and it went into a wetland, and it caused a lot of siltation. And the commission came in, with Peggy Fantazzi, pushed forward with a provision that when they revised the regulations, and I think it's completely justified. Anytime you're within 2 feet of the water table, you need to know what's happening, and if it's going to happen, you need to. I mean, I use it on my commission all the time. And in this case, we're not planning on dewatering, so there is no impact from siltation. If we had to, there is a provision in here for dewatering to a frac tank with a silt bag in it, out of the buffer zone. The that provision was a very good idea, so you would know if they were gonna be in the water table. And provide a provision for controlling it and making sure it was, if it had to be done, it was done in a manner that would not impact the wetland. And there wouldn't be somebody wouldn't put a pump underneath the foundation and just start pumping the groundwater permanently. There's no provision, no plan on doing that here. There's no need to do it. The footings can be in the water table and it'll be perfectly safe and sound. There's no contaminants that come out of the concrete that are going to impact the water quality of the groundwater. The groundwater will still flow around it and flow under it and make its way to the wetland. It may go a little bit slower than it's going now, which would help the peak floods but it will still make its way, and it won't back up and cause flooding on anybody else's property. There's been a swale that's been proposed over behind, just a slight swale to direct water so it doesn't impact the neighbor's property. Make sure we don't have any problems like that. One other thing that I forgot to mention that I need to mention, there is a split rail fence over here that's both on and off the property. That is going to be replaced, probably with a board fence, but it would just be, it's outside of 50, it's on the other side of the house from the wetland, but I'd just like it to be shown in the record, and in the plan it doesn't call it out. So I think your provision for separation to the water table is a very good thing for you to ask for. But with that, you get the information about how will it impact the water table, impact the resource area. And in this case, in my opinion, it will not, especially if they do it when the water table is low. They're not working in the water table, the actual water table at the time they're doing construction. The seasonal high water table comes up and down and fluctuates because of the perched nature out here. It's not part of the region of the island aquifer water table. It's a whole perch system that all around this area. It's all clay underneath there, very thick. But anyway,
My question relates to the alteration of more than 50% of the land between the 25 and 50-foot buffer. And it seems to me that with just a little bit of reorientation of the site, especially because you have some leeway with moving part of this proposed driveway off to the right, you could get, and maybe you need to reorient this house a little bit, but you could seemingly easily get to less than 50% altered by just a few slight orientation changes, and I'm wondering why that wasn't considered as a reasonable alternative.
well, we did move it up. I mean, we're also looking at this area because since it is a mowed lawn, it is currently altered, and under the net benefit provision in your waiver proposals or waiver procedures, we felt it was a reasonable thing to convert lawn into an effective. I mean, right now we've got a vegetative right along the edge of the wetland. It's Japanese knotweed and then a piece of lawn. And we're proposing to come back out to the 25, reestablish a very effective shrub swamp. So it's not just the 25 to 50, it's the 25 to 0 that we're causing a great deal of approval. We have shifted, this plan does reflect it, shifted quite a bit. We've gone from, before we had 600 square feet of restoration, and now we have 1,000. We moved it over and picked that up.
Yeah, I understand the long-term net benefit, but I still think there can be a little bit more change to the plan to get that extra 14%, and we wouldn't have to waiver this for more than 50% alteration. It seems like there's ample space on this site to do that.
Yeah, I have to say it's concerning for me to see these subdivisions where the new lot lines have been drawn without looking at that stuff first. You know, like these could have been drawn differently to preserve that 50% pretty easily. You know, but we've maximized what will fit in this location.
I mean, and I don't have the original plan. This has always been 2 lots.
Okay.
This was 2 lots, and there was a lot that I think I don't have the original, but I believe the lot line basically went through. Through this way, which meant that one house is gonna be right here, and one house is gonna be right here. This one will be asking for all sorts of waivers, including 50%
Or
of the,
undevelopable.
well, that's a reasonable alternative. But it was a lot of record. It's historically been a lot, and this reconfiguration at least gets the buildings outside of 50, and it's only just a driveway that's across an existing lawn, and reestablishment of I shouldn't do meetings minutes numbers at meetings. Anyway, we're giving back. Whatever. We're giving back a lot more than what was there. I mean, did you do a site visit out there recently and look at it?
So, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, it was it's mowed lawn right down to the knotweed.
So, this is something that we've talked about before, not really recently, but the way that 50% alteration is written, it doesn't really contemplate what that alteration is. And so we've had waiver requests before where that alteration is technically converting from a lawn area to native vegetation is still an alteration. So there's no contemplation in the way that's written for what that alteration needs to be one way or the other, that any alteration requires the waiver in this case for greater than 50%. So just make believe, just scenario wise, that if there was no driveway and you were replanting that whole area and converting it from lawn, you would still, by the letter of the law, require that waiver because it's a 50%. You're altering that area. So it's something where I know it doesn't necessarily help, but I think that's something that as we move forward, maybe clarifying what that alteration or defining what that criteria a little bit better would be helpful, because when you do the math on it, having areas that are getting naturalized requiring waivers to do it is something that I don't necessarily think is what we're looking to do. So it's one of the things that's tricky when quantifying it. And it's something that I know, I feel like Ernie was probably on the commission when this came in, and this was something that has been talked about from time to time on how that alteration is really truly defined and what the intent of it is.
The intent was clearly to protect native vegetation in that zone, not to protect lawns or a building. They said, you can't take that building out because you're altering that 50%. No, it was to protect native vegetation, and I think in a case like this where it's lawn, it doesn't really matter so much if you alter that in a, as if it, instead of being if it was a meadow or something, that would be different.
My opinion is that I understand where we're coming from about the intent of the alteration, but a lawn still is much better at absorbing moisture than a driveway. Even if it's a pervious gravel driveway, it gets compacted over time with cars driving on it. It settles into kind of the footprint of that driveway. And I still, it's a lawn, but I still think a lawn is, in the long term, more of a net benefit to the resource with groundwater flow and overland flow than a driveway is.
True.
Well, in that, if you're looking at that way, the area inside of 50, we have permeable lawn above it, so we're actually altering. I mean, in terms of that permeability is still there. The only gravel driveways are permeable. I'm a hydrogeologist. I understand what you're talking about. But so if we just look at the area of the driveway compared to the 50%, and not how close. What I'm looking at is a strip of land over here that's being restored. I mean, actually, we are restoring a lot more by putting in the vegetation does buffer the wildlife, the functions of the wetlands. It helps protect the wetlands. And that's why we're expanding the buffer. But if you want to look at just the area of the driveway, we still have impervious. If we got outside of the 50%, we'd still have the same impervious situation. It would just be a little bit farther away.
Could you do a grass strip down the middle, kind of reduce some of that impact?
I can talk to the applicant on that.
Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking of that, because that would be a way to
Get more
provide,
percentage.
something
Right.
isn't gonna be compacted and people are driving in the same area, at least it's not people moving all around and compacting a wide
Right.
swath.
I mean,
I think that's a great idea.
and I can come back with the numbers of the amount of pervious lawn that will remain on the still within 50, but up above.
So the other thing is where the LP tanks are gonna go, above ground. You're not gonna bury any, so that's just if you could put that on the plan,
Okay.
or however you're gonna, I don't see any mechanical rooms, so that's kind of got me thinking where we're gonna have gas storage, et cetera. I mean, you're gonna be heating pools, heating the house.
And maybe just a better exploration of the alternatives for that 2-foot separation.
Okay.
You know, whether it's moving the house up the hill a little bit, making it smaller, which I know they could do.
Well, the ground coverage is a staggering increase.
Yeah.
What's the,
Mhm.
what, by a factor of 3 or 4?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when we look at how the phrase is worded, it's no reasonable alternatives, no adverse impacts that will allow the project to proceed as planned. And I think that we can allow this project to proceed as planned with the same general idea of having these houses and accessory structures, but we could probably get around at least the 25 to 50 alteration waiver, and I think we could probably get around the 2-foot groundwater separation waiver as well if we just did a little bit of adjustment and alternative analysis.
Well, we are continuing for 2 weeks, so.
I needed to open it up to the public still.
Hmm.
So no more questions from the commission?
Yeah, I don't have a problem with the mount with the slab though. I don't have a problem with how they this slab.
Okay. Questions from the public? Oh. Looks like they beat you to it.
Jessie Bell on behalf of the Land Bank. I sent this letter to Jeff a few minutes before the meeting, so I'm not
Yes.
sure.
No one has gotten it, 'cause it
Okay.
was right before the meeting. Well, we'll get it,
Jesse, speak closer to
Yes,
the
to the mic, please.
we'll get it distributed.
Yeah.
Sorry, not ready.
Yeah, well, we could share.
So we're just here to assert the Land Bank's ownership interest in Wires Way, which is entirely located on Land Bank property, and we think presents a significant legal issue that needs to be resolved. And we just, want to put that in the record. And it's not obviously Concom jurisdiction, but it's something that needs to get resolved. And there was not a detailed landscape plan in the submission that we could see and review in detail. So there was we looked just for background. I know that this is not your jurisdiction, but just for context, there's no specific grant of easement on record for the 3 Wires Way. And so the A&R subdivision that was approved was based, it appears to be based on an assumption of access, or so it seems as though it's just an issue that needs to be resolved, and we need to confer with council and speak with the proponents of this project.
So just to be clear, you own this whole strip here?
Yes, it's basically a panhandle on our
Okay.
of our lot.
Lawyers are working on that.
So,
there.
I guess a question for the applicant, is there alternative access to the site that doesn't go through the land bank land?
No, this land was created through an approval not required plan, partially on a lot that was in 1954, and a second approval not required plan that was approved by the planning board in 1968. Those plans and other deeds all show this land as a way to New Lane. It is, if it's not a way, then it's landlocked. If it's landlocked, then it would be subject to adverse possession or prescriptive rights that would create access, none of which we should get deep into now.
Yeah,
Sure, I would say
yeah.
that
It's
that is a matter between the applicants and the land bank.
Right.
We are happy to stay out of that.
So I think we were just asking for a little bit more time, we're just here to ensure that this item gets continued to the next meeting so that we have more time to, because this actually, we were not notified about, because there was no notification requirements for the A&R plan. So this only came to our attention as an abutter for the Concom application.
And like I said, when I opened,
Can I just
we're
make sure
amenable
that everyone's
to
talking into that microphone?
Sure. As we opened, we're amenable to the continuation because we don't want to have any flaws in the approval and the permit based on this issue. So we'll work it through and we'll be back in 2 weeks. And we'll obviously revise the plan to deal with having nothing outside of the 4 corners of the lot until we've dealt with whether or not we have rights to.
Okay.
Alrighty then.
Thank you.
Good time.
Thank you.
You're asking for it to be continued to the 11th.
We still need other
public,
comment.
yeah.
we're not doing
Public comment.
Okay.
RJ?
Can I keep that? Yes, please do. Don't want to burn a hole in the table there.
RJ Turcott, Nantucket Land Council. Just to clarify on our letter, this lot is going from developed to subdivided and obviously maxed out. But as far as a rearrangement goes, we feel that moving the driveway to the western portions of the lot, it already is crossing at least a corner of Lot A, so I don't know there would be an issue crossing on this side, and moving the dwellings also uphill would lessen the impact on the resource area as far as the waivers required for the footings in the groundwater, and the auxiliary structures could be moved to the other side, and that would potentially eliminate having the waiver to alter anything in the resource area, which is obviously already impacted and will be impacted further. Again, it's a gravel driveway, but all gravel driveways over time start to lose their permeability as you drive over them and they become compacted. So moving that driveway to the other side and moving those dwellings a little back so you can put your pools and auxiliary structures on the other side would lessen the impact on the resource area, possibly eliminate the need for a waiver next to this resource area. Just to clarify what we were trying to get across in the letter. I know it was a little lengthy, but that's what we were trying to get across. So, thank you.
Any other concerns from the commission? Okay, would you like to continue for 2 weeks?
Yes, please.
Okay, so this will continue until September 11th. Okay, so moving on to Constance and Thomas Sigaran, 25 East Tristram Lane, Ave, excuse me.
We had continued this last time, Madam Chairman, to receive a file note from DEP, which we have received.
Okay.
So,
Should I just go?
Maybe wait for the shuffle so that the mic picks you up.
Art Gasparo, Nantucket Engineering. This is the second hearing for the seasonal aluminum staircase from the top of the timber bulkhead down to the beach. And as Jeff had mentioned, we didn't have a file number last time. I don't believe there was any other outstanding concerns.
Any questions from the commission?
Well, I feel we've missed an opportunity here to ensure public access. So
How so?
well, when do they actually come in for the bulkhead to be reinforced?
This one I think is just for the seasonal aluminum stairs.
Right, no, I understand.
You're talking
Yeah.
about the original.
Yeah,
Is that
so that
2
going forward with,
Yeah, it's about 2 years.
2 years
Yeah.
ago maybe?
Maybe 3.
yeah, so I really feel that, I just wanted to bring that to the new commissioner's attention, and that I feel that we might have been more forceful going forward about the bulkhead, and they're gonna become more of an issue, so, with the lack of public access,
So
so.
are you saying we shouldn't have required the sand nourishment?
No, I'm not. I feel we've somehow dug ourselves into a hole. Not that. So I'm just bringing it up. So.
I think it's been stated by both the applicant and members of the public that there is a possibility for an access point to the public should they bring a permit to the commission. That is just outside of the purview of this specific notice of intent.
Yeah, and I think it's not the general public. It's a very limited access that we've been discussing here.
Right.
So I totally see the issue, but they can come and request stairs.
They have
The sand nourishment's important to protect the beach over time, so. But we're hearing the aluminum stairs now, so.
And that's all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
So,
any questions from the public on this? Okay. Art, would you like to close?
Yes, please.
Is there a motion?
motion to close.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so moving on to Sarah and Thomas DC Brown and Little, 9 North Avenue.
Madam Chair, I need to recuse, please.
Okay.
For the applicant, Art Gasparo, this is the second public hearing for the property located down behind the Nantucket Hotel, where we are proposing to pick up the existing structures within land subject to coastal storm flowage and the buffer zone to a vegetated wetland. And there had been there was some discussion about the driveway. We're removing an asphalt driveway, and that there's been some parking in lawn areas. So what we've done is we've provided a revised plan, which shows a Belgian block border around a gravel driveway, so that there's a more defined actual parking area, and parking would not be permitted on the lawn any further. And by sort of just making it was very undefined in the past. So we're just creating an actual driveway area that would be pervious, gravel or gravel shell type of a mix. And that's the change that we made. You could see the driveways moving slightly further away from the wetland. These areas have these structures are quite old, certainly predate the regulations, as does the use of the property. Maintained areas, the best we could tell. So we think it's an improvement to the interest protected by the commission, certainly in terms of getting rid of that amount of asphalt driveway so close, more properly defining where cars would park, and then coming into compliance with construction within the flood zone, regular building codes, as well as zoning codes. We're also moving out of the setbacks, so we're trying to trying to fix it up.
So it's 750 square feet of asphalt.
Yep.
I see the improvement, but then I don't at the same time. This is a tough one for me, because part of the addition is within the 50 as well.
If I may, it's the very smallest, you know, sliver, you know, it's a few square feet, and I could tell you that the original intent there was to sort of keep it outside, but from a surveying perspective, when I was looking at the actual setbacks, and you might notice along the property line, I don't want to get too survey wonky on you here, but there's two different lines shown for that property line. There's some ambiguity that's going on there, and so a conservative survey approach to avoid the setbacks is part of what's resulted in that. So we do see, you know, the intent was certainly not to add addition into the 50, but that's the house they designed. That then trying to maintain the 50. That then when I, you know, put it on to the plan that would be used for final permitting, and again, you know, getting rid of that much asphalt that does count as structure under the regulations, I thought was a pretty actual overwhelming benefit from, not to argue, but a different perspective.
It's just a porch though, right? So you could reduce that slightly.
There's a deck porch, and there's a very small sliver of the addition. You know, I mean, it's like 2 square feet or something, and they've got the house designed in HDC, and so I would hope that, not trying to get away with anything, but when you compare that to 750 square feet of structure within the 50, and much of it even within the 25, it seemed to me to be the net balance quite favorable to the protected interests.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with that little sliver. I think it's de minimis and isn't going to really impact anything significant. I mean, it is over the line, but there's trade-offs, and sometimes, you know, getting too hung up on these little tiny things, just I don't see the point myself.
Yeah. Right. Any other questions or comments from the commission? Questions from the public? All right, Jeff, do we have everything we need to close? Art, would you like to close?
Yes, please.
Do I have a motion? Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That passes with Commissioner Engelborg recused. Oh, the fun one. Okay, moving on to Dwortsky and Bantz Family Trust, 8 Shakamo Road. Yeah, it's a loud one too. We're at our own party, obviously. When? No, they're next week.
Thank you. Hi, David. Is this the hot seat?
Yep.
David Haynes for the applicant. What is proposed here is, it's a notice of intent for the removal of an existing house and construction of a new house with swimming pool and a garage apartment and landscaping. Some of the work will be in the buffer zone to a bordering vegetated wetland. We looked at this, there was recently a notice of intent on this property with a redelineation of the wetlands that we did in, let's see, 2000 and 2007, and 2000 again. And that was a notice of intent for re-establishment of moving the fence that was out there and recreating a 25-foot vegetated buffer that was supposed to be created under a previous notice of intent that had expired. So there was a restoration project, a buffer zone restoration project that was approved by the commission, I can't remember, in February or so. and that work has been completed. The split rail fence has been relocated over in this area to get the 25-foot offset from the bordering vegetated wetland and a policy coastal bank in that area. That has been, the replanting has been done. The rest of the project is all new. The project is well above I'm not asking for any waivers. We've got more than 2-foot separation. The water table is down according to the measurement in the well on the property, is down around an elevation of 5. Most of the site where the work is occurring is up around 33, and even with 9-foot, 10-foot footings and things like that, we're 15 or 20 feet above the water table. So no separation, no waivers in that respect. This landscape plan does show a vegetated buffer establishing greater than, basically at the 38-foot line back off of the wetland, except for 2 areas, one where this will be added and this will be subtracted, but it's still all within, I don't know, that's the way the landscape plan. There's more than 50% of vegetative buffer between 25 and 50 that will remain. So we're not asking for any waivers. A portion of the pool and a portion of the house and the garage are within the buffer zone. There will be grading that's shown on the landscape plan, mostly filling of areas and sloping it. And then there is a landscape plan that does describe any kind of revegetating, anything between the 37 and the 25 that needs to be done. So we are, in summary, we are removing the existing house, building a new house with a swimming pool and a garage, landscaping, reestablishing any kind of vegetative buffer where there wasn't one, between 25 and 37 and a half feet, and restoring that area. No fertilizers, no irrigation, no pesticides within the buffer zone.
So we didn't actually get
Yeah, we
that.
didn't get that.
Can I have a look at it, please?
Yeah, it came in, I think, over the weekend.
Yeah, I missed it. Thank you.
Basically, the site plan, the only thing different on the site plan doesn't show any grading. That's reflected on the landscape plan, and there is a slightly different vegetative buffer that's shown on the site plan than what's on that. So it's slightly different than, we'd like the vegetative buffer that's shown on the landscape plan and the grading as the land plan, on the landscape plan, to act as the plan, one of the plans of record.
Clear to me on what we were looking at. So it looks like on the landscape plan, it's showing Panicum shenandoah, which is a cultivar. I think we'd like the regular Panicum virgatum, just the native species that exists.
And my question, if you're essentially trying to restore native species to the 37.5 mark, would you move the split rail fence to that point?
Yes.
Okay, so, because I think on the landscape plan it says it's at the 25.
I think we should move it, to the edge of the vegetative buffer.
Okay.
You could certainly condition that as well.
Okay. It just calls it out on that landscape plan, so.
I'm sorry, it was a panicum what?
Virgatum, I think it is.
Regular switchgrass.
I'm a geologist.
Switchgrass.
And
It's
we can
virgatum,
also-
right?
Yeah.
Virgatum,
We can condition no cultivars as well within the 50, which is pretty standard. Any other questions or concerns from the commission? Questions from the public? have everything we need to close?
We do.
Would you like to close?
I would love to close.
Is there a motion?
Move to close.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Carries unanimously. Moving on to Elizabeth and Robert Rothbard at 3 Brooks Farm Road.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
For the applicant, Art Gasparo, Nantucket Engineering, before you tonight with a residential development project for work within the buffer zone to an isolated vegetated wetland up off of the very end of Brooks Farm Road, which some of you might be familiar with if is kind of the far end of Gingy or Gingy Lane. And we are proposing, it's a vacant lot right now, and to construct a single-family dwelling within the 100-foot buffer zone. And we've kept the structural elements outside of the 50-foot buffer zone, and I've set the limit of work at the 38-foot buffer zone. I have with me tonight, and I don't like to surprise anybody, there's no changes, but I have a stamped survey plan with the proposed structure that I'd like to submit. I just realized today that I had provided an existing conditions plan, which would, and then plus the landscape plan. The landscape plan had been developed from my plan, but I hadn't given you the plan that was stamped that showed the proposed structure. So I wanted to make sure that you had that, and I put in red on that plan both the 38-foot line, which represents maintaining at least 50% of the area between the 25 and the 50 as undisturbed, so that would become the silt fence and limit of work. And then you can see the 50 and the 100, and the other, half of the lot is outside of the jurisdiction of the commission. The only waiver which we have asked for is for separation distance for the footings to groundwater. We don't believe the footings will be in the groundwater, but they would be within 2 feet. Any dewatering would be temporary, and we have a large portion of the property that we could do that dewatering activity, and it's not gonna run back anywhere near the resource area. So we don't believe there's any chance of impact to the protected interests.
So this is another one where within the 50, the planting border, the species aren't called out. It just says viburnum, like we'd want viburnum dentatum, no cultivars. It also says hydrangea, which makes me a little nervous.
The hydrangeas that I talked about with the landscaper were to go around just the perimeter of the house.
Okay, he has it called out within the 50-foot buffer.
Yeah.
And then it says roses as well, so we just want to specify that those are a native variety and probably
Absolutely.
scrap the hydrangea.
Would the hydrangea be acceptable at the perimeter of the structure?
Yes,
Okay, I think as long as that.
right, I mean, not
sure that they
preferred,
can-
but
I'm sure they can modify that.
any other questions or concerns? Good. Questions from the public?
So as far as the waiver request goes, sorry, RJ, Nantucket Land Council. As far as the waiver request goes, I was wondering if the applicant had explored alternatives to the basement, like a crawl space or a slab foundation, so there wouldn't be a need for the waiver to be granted. That's all.
Thank you.
I'd be happy to address that. We did look at we're doing an 8.5-foot pour with the foundation wall instead of the 10-foot wall for that very reason, to keep above the actual groundwater elevation so that they don't want to have a wet basement either and get into the expense and difficulty of waterproofing. So while we're in that 2-foot zone, I believe that, there wouldn't be an impact on, they want to have a basement, not just a crawl space. But that we have reduced that height because we absolutely don't want to interrupt the groundwater. And I would also say that I did a test pit at the location of the proposed structure to determine the groundwater elevation. And we're going to where I observed redoxamorphic features, and it was about almost 2 feet higher than where I actually observed the groundwater elevation at. So we're going to what I believe is we're well above even an estimated seasonal high groundwater elevation. So I've taken into account what I believe to be the seasonal fluctuation, and then with your waiver, there's another 2 feet above that. So that's the basis, which I hope helps. We have looked at it because we don't want the structure in the groundwater, which is what I believe the real concern of the commission is.
Right, and this area is
Right.
wet.
They don't want to be pumping.
Was there any talk about having the structure further back, or is there a higher point on the lot?
They're going to, I didn't show it on the plan, but there's another structure that's proposed in a driveway. So there's a garage with like so they're using it, but it's out of your jurisdiction. So that's why there is a, sort of a more overall, it's shown on the landscape plan. You can see the other structure in the driveway area, so.
All right. Any other questions or concerns from the commission? Not from this side. You good on the other side? Okay. Jeff, do we have everything we need to close?
Yes, ma'am.
Would you like to close?
Yes, please.
Is there a motion?
Motion to close?
Is there a second?
Sure.
All in favor? Aye.
Thank you.
Passes unanimously. Moving on to Sarah McLean, 6 Gull Island Lane.
Good evening. Brian Madden from LEC Environmental with Sarah McLean, the applicant. And proposed project involves 2 additions, small additions on the back side of the house, and removal of a cantilevered structure element and replacing it with a bay window. This is off Gull Island Road. The wetland system is across Gull Island, and no work is proposed within the 25-foot. The 2 new additions, 5 by 12, and then the back one is a little over 6 by 6. 3.5 by 6, sorry. Those are going to be supported by crawl space or a slab. The cantilevered structure, 79 square feet, is proposed to be removed within the 50-foot, replaced with a 15-foot square foot bay window. We have requested a waiver for that structural work, and obviously it's going to decrease the structural footprint in the 50-foot and increase, provide a long-term net benefit. This is an older structure. There's some proposed rehab to the foundation, just in kind and in place, and just some general upkeep to the existing structure. Aside from that structural decrease in the 50-foot, no waivers, no additional waivers requested. There is a monitoring well north of Gull Island Road, and then one was installed in the back portion of the lot. It kind of slopes off from Gull Island to the back. So there is a variation of groundwater here, which is not surprising given perch water system, and this is part of the overall town drainage system too. So I guess I'll just turn it over to questions.
Questions from the commission? No. My only comment, I guess, is for like the construction protocol. Just to be careful where vehicles are parked and things are stored, since the road is on the wetland side.
Yeah, there's a fence there, so
Yeah.
there won't be any room to park along
Okay.
that. So
Any questions from the public? Do we have everything we need to close?
Yeah. Good luck.
Yeah. Would you like to close?
please.
Is there a motion? Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Carries unanimously.
Thank you very much.
you.
It is a very cool structure.
It is a cool structure.
The foundations can be done by hand, so you don't need to worry about excavators going in.
I was wondering how this.
You're gonna find some cool things in there, I'm sure. Okay, so moving into amended orders of conditions, 64 Wall Street LLC at 66 Wall Street, formerly 64 Wall Street, Lot 1.
Good evening, Mark Ritz from Site Design, representing the applicants at 66 Walsh. This is a project that was approved a while ago. It was a redevelopment of a residential lot that was subdivided. The majority of the work was done in compliance with the approval, the construction of the house, pool, secondary dwelling, etc., landscaping. The one item that was added to the work was a shed up front on the Walsh Street side. So I am here with an amendment to request approval to construct the shed after the fact. The shed is sitting, basically on the ground on a couple of cement blocks. It's not, typical small shed. It was constructed in a previously altered portion of the property that was, lawn and landscaped area. The resource area in question here is land subject to coastal storm flowage, and that's pretty much it.
What size is your typical small shed?
This thing is, this is one that didn't require a building permit. I think it's like 10 by 12, Yeah, it's one of those, typical sheds that's put up everywhere. It's
Doesn't
not,
count against ground cover shed.
doesn't count against ground cover, doesn't, it's about a 10 by 12 approximately.
Yeah, you say 100 square feet in the application. So.
Yeah, something along those lines. Wasn't remembering the number off the top of my head, but it is an actual shed rather than a, potential other living space structure. It's honestly a shed.
Is
it a flood zone?
The whole property is in the flood zone.
But I'm just kind of surprised it doesn't have footing.
I don't believe it has. I don't believe it has any footings. At least none that I was told about.
It's got a mast in the sail.
It may be a shed at my office.
Yeah.
Yes. I guess just what makes me nervous here is this area, I know it's flood zone, but we're really having trouble with the flooding during rain events. And then to be adding more and more and more, like this might seem small, but in reality, if you get 2 inches of rainfall, like we've had those events this summer, is that moving to the neighboring property off of the shed roof?
I think the shed up on the piers would just go underneath it.
This doesn't have a foundation under
If
it.
it was a full foundation, I see your point.
Yeah.
But I think it's open.
Yeah, but still, the pitch of the roof, it's not gonna fall under the shed, so ultimately, I think we've gotta look at this area more critically.
I agree, but I think in this situation.
It'll
Yeah.
fall immediately next to the shed. This thing doesn't have a significant overhang. It's running right off and falling right next to it. And with a structure this small, it will probably, if there's that much rainfall, it will probably flow underneath and around it. We're not talking about a 40 by 100-foot house. We're talking about a 8 by 10, 10 by 12 shed. I mean, it's basically 2 or 3 of these tables in size.
Yeah.
I mean, if there is significant concern about the runoff on the shed, would there be a possibility to just plant some shrubs around the shed to contain that water?
Certainly a possibility. There is a line of vegetation, you know, already on this side, on this side, and on this side.
Guys, the mics are picking up probably everybody.
All right, so before we get too far afield, and I hate doing this because I am the first to say that the Brant Point neighborhood has drainage problems well above and beyond what we're going to talk about or even contemplate solving. The resource area that we're dealing with in the buffer zone doesn't really contemplate or allow for impacts for rainfall from coastal storm flowage. Trust me, I 100% agree that we need to do a better job with managing infiltration and rainfall, especially in neighborhoods like this that are prone to coastal flooding. But before we get too far afield in conditioning it, remember that it relates to the flooding from coastal storm flowage and not necessarily from rainfall right now. When regulations come over again, a little different discussion if we want to look at it. No, but that's what I'm saying is before we try to condition something that we don't have jurisdiction over, I just have to be the wet blanket that I don't want to be.
So we're gonna redo the regs, so hopefully look at that stuff. All right, any other questions? Okay, is there a motion to close an issue? Is that what we do for this one, right?
Yes.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Okay, that passes unanimously. Moving on to request for determination. 123 Cliff Road nominee trust at 123 Cliff Road.
I don't know why I'm struggling with shuffling papers today, but I am.
For the applicant, Art Gasparo, before you tonight, with a RDA with no work proposed for, resource area, boundary determination for about 5 flags tied up on the, opposite side of the, dirt track of, Gosnold Road.
So all I'll just say is we did review the 5 flags and the delineation there, and would agree, and I'll just cut to the chase and recommend a positive 2A confirming that resource area boundary.
Okay. Do I have a motion? Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to 78 Walwinet Road LLC at 78 Walwinet Road.
It's a little bit more complicated. I think I may have given you did I give you the right one?
We go full size on this one.
I think I gave you the.
Yep.
This is
Oh.
crazy.
It looks like an ant farm.
Sticky paper clip. Not that it's a ton different, but.
Right.
Very good.
It's really the constellation map of Cassiopeia.
Again,
Or
for
a very strange dot-to-dot picture.
for the applicant, Art Gasparo. Before you tonight, again, for resource area determination, RDA, and no work is proposed. These boundaries were approved back in, I believe it was 2012, and we have updated the coastal bank has eroded a bit, so we've put the current top of bank on the plan, and are before you tonight just to, again, hold this delineation with no work proposed.
Jeff, was staff able to confirm this?
Yes, so we spent a lot more time confirming it when we originally did it. I know Bruce and I both confirmed it originally, and went back and relocated and then checked the updated areas, and are still in agreement with the resource area delineations as shown. So I would say it's a positive 2A, pretty much for every resource area that we have in the regulations.
Okay.
I think Barrier Beach is like one of the only ones that's missing.
No, it's on there.
No, it's there. Yeah, I think this is literally one of the only few that I think has pretty much every resource area. It's a lot.
Lucky them.
It's a, I will say, it is
Diversity.
probably in my, like, of properties I've been on, like, a top 5 property for, it's just cool. It's got big trees, and it's awesome property.
Very cool. All right, so is there a motion to, approve a positive 2A?
So moved.
Is there a second? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Perfect, that passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Everything's unplugged.
Yeah.
My computer's about to die.
I usually come.
Oh, it's Davis. What was, did I get the call in?
We gave you the eye on that one. Okay, moving into minor modifications. Petroselli at 2 North Beach Street. I pronounced that wrong.
Yep, I'm going. Sorry, just picking up from the last one.
Thank you. On behalf of the applicant Bridget and Nicholas Petroselli, Paul Santos with Nantucket Surveyors. Petrosellis are the owner of the property at 2 North Beach Street. Actually, before I start, I'd like to take the opportunity to thank Jeff, Joe, and this commission for the condolences that were offered to myself and my family. It's been a difficult summer, but you know, the outpouring from consider my family here in Nantucket has been great, and I really do appreciate it. So with that, I think I have a very simple application before you tonight. This is a minor modification to a order of conditions that was issued for an addition to the existing structure for a proposed living space addition and a proposed porch on the front of the property at 2 North Beach Street. That application came before the prior commission about a year ago, and an order of conditions was issued. This is land subject to coastal storm flowage, and we're also within the buffer zone to the wetland or non-wetland at the corner of Easton and North Beach Street. So what this application is a minor mod in which the living space component of the structure has been eliminated, so there will be no proposed living space addition. There'll simply be a open porch constructed on the front of the dwelling. And that's it. Piers, no foundation set up, just an open porch on the front. Been approved by the HDC, and that's the minor modification application. I think fairly simple. So the same conditions would apply, the original waivers and everything of the original order would all be still applicable, as we are still adding structure. It's albeit we're not adding living space anymore. So, and that's the minor mod.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the commission? Is there a motion to approve the minor mod?
Move to issue.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. It is a long one. All right, so moving on to 205 EP Trust, 205 Eel Point Road.
Jeff Blackwell for the applicant. We came down to the end of the project, and I also have a request for a certificate of compliance on the agenda for tonight, and I realized there'd been a few minor changes to the project throughout its construction. There was a pergola area that was proposed to be constructed near the pool. And the pergola had been substituted with a smaller deck, which is, positive in that sense. The lawn area is significantly smaller than had been previously approved. And, a bluestone stepping stone walkway had been constructed coming off of that reduced the deck. All the bluestone stepping stones are greater than 50 feet away from the coastal bank. So there was one addition in the bluestones, but 2 reductions in the scope of the project otherwise. So I wanted to get that housekeeping sort of out of the way before we requested this certificate of compliance.
Thank you.
Which is good, because we would have said we need to fix that before we issue the certificate
Yeah.
of compliance, so it worked out well.
Perfect. Any
All good things.
questions? Is there a motion to issue the minor mod?
So moved.
Yes, I would say too, if you guys want, we would recommend the issuance of the certificate of compliance too. If you guys want to do it all at once, because it's in compliance with the minor mod getting
Well,
through.
Okay.
There you go.
Just to knock them all
So
out.
moved.
How about that?
So moved. Is there a second? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Speed us along a little bit. Thank you. Okay. Then we're moving into certificates of compliance.
There's the-
And we'll start with Monomoy LLC at 20 Monomoy Road.
Classic, thank you. Gotta do the shift of things. So 20 Monomoy Road, the certificate of compliance. On this, we had continued from last time to address a discharge, which has been fixed. Other than that, it was just a gutter discharge that's been removed, and that problem has been addressed, and it's in compliance. The rest of the project is in compliance, and we feel that the certificate of compliance can be issued. Yes, just as is. Sorry, I was mixing it up with the different one.
So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that passes unanimously. Moving on to Oak Hollow Realty Trust at 12A Oak Hollow Lane.
Yes, 12A Oak Hollow Lane was a certificate of compliance for a garage and driveway constructed in the buffer zone to a vegetated wetland. Again, this is a project that was constructed in compliance, and we're recommending it being issued with no ongoing conditions as well.
Okay, is there a motion?
Move to issue the certificate of compliance.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. That carries unanimously. And then moving on to Giles at 145 Walwinet Road.
This is a reissue. The certificate of compliance was issued eons ago, and it was lost and not recorded, so they're just asking for it to be reissued. So this was an order that was originally issued in 1990. That has been completed for a very long time. I wasn't even in high school in 1990.
Yeah, either. 7. Is there a
Just saying.
motion to reissue the certificate of compliance?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Oh, I'm old. I teach teenagers. My car is older than that. It is. All right, moving into orders of conditions.
Here.
Right.
Take one, pass them
Um,
around. I'll say, I didn't draft a few that we ended up closing this evening. So try not to draft ones that have waivers and things
Things
that
like
get
that.
discussed.
Okay. So we'll begin with Grant L. and Margaret C. Cambridge at 10 Medui Creek Road.
Yep, I did do that one. So that was the retaining wall project, the kind of the after the fact that they've ended up removing the retaining wall.
They went and did it all.
Yeah, so do we, should it just say removal of the existing retaining wall?
No, because there are some portions outside of 50 feet that are staying. I thought about that a bit. Actually, I think I wrote that at first, but then when you look at the plans,
The
there's a section
hedges.
that comes back
As a little return.
outside of 50 that's being left for now.
So do you want to say this order permits the maintenance of existing, there's this typo there?
One second.
And then retaining wall outside of 50 feet?
Maybe. Yeah, so I think it's a maintenance of existing, retaining walls outside of the 50-foot setback.
Then we're not gonna need this waiver anymore, right?
No, because they still are doing work within that.
Yeah,
Okay,
so they're
okay.
doing the replanting work that's there, so they still technically
Uh,
require it.
Do we need to specify native species, no cultivars?
Um, sure, we can put a condition 21. No cultivars are permitted.
Is there a motion to approve as amended?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. So, moving on to Lottie Leshley QPRT and Jan Leshley QPRT at 65 Squam Road.
This is the cantilever deck. I didn't really have any conditions other than some photo monitoring. But I will point out too that the plan of record does show land subject to coastal storm flowage on the plan, but we're not doing any work within it. So I just have a finding that
So,
we're confirming that as well.
is this one that we need to explicitly say in conditions that the cantilever deck will not be considered for structural
Oh.
livable space in the future?
Yeah, so I know it's on the plan, so I think you'd want to condition 20 that the decks approved by this order shall not be converted to interior living space. You might as well put it, if the decks approved by this order shall not be converted to interior living space and have a minimum of 1/8 inch between boards. I know those both are both notes on the plan,
Yeah.
but if we're gonna
Yeah.
put the one note on, we might as well put the other one with it, all in the same sentence.
That's a good point. Move to approve is modified.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that carries unanimously. Okay, so moving on to Nantucket Property Trust, 13 Hallowell Lane.
Numbers are all over the place. This was the groin and bulkhead work that was here. So we typically, so I don't have to type the longest conditions ever, just include the copy of the Natural Heritage letter that has those conditions on there and put a finding that it's there. And then we just had some photographs, and any nourished material that's placed just has to be reported back to the commission on an annual basis.
Move to approve is drafted.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
That passes unanimously. think we're moving on to Constance and Thomas Sigaran.
Yes.
At 25 East Tristram Avenue.
So my point was that we missed an opportunity when they came in to have the bulkhead repaired 3 years ago, I think it was, Ernie, to actually insist on public access across it, because it just, when it's high tide, you can't get anywhere near, you can't get it, you know, the beach is cut off. And that was my point, so it wasn't actually to do with the squabble between the neighbors. So, and I really think going forward.
We weren't aware of that too.
Right, right, and so,
But I get your point.
yeah. Okay, thank you.
Move to issue as drafted.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That passes unanimously.
So real quickly, before we move on to the next one, I had knocked out to one for 9 North Avenue. Does anyone have any comments or concerns? That was the one that, with the structures being elevated and relocated for zoning, and then the asphalt parking area
Oh.
coming out and redelineated. Nothing jumping out.
Well, what are you gonna put to, assure that there's no parking on the grass anymore? Are they gonna delineate that
It's
somehow?
the Belgian block.
Belgian block
Belgian
in that
block?
area.
Is that on the plan? I didn't see
Yeah.
that, so, okay.
Um,
Thank you.
So if no one has anything, I'll draft up an order for next time.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably already in your permit that the construction materials are outside. Yeah. Okay, so we are on Dworsky Bantz Family Trust at 8 Shakamo Road.
So this was the new one that was there. I think we wanted to add a condition 23 that no cultivars
Yes.
Yeah.
are permitted within the 50-foot setback.
Mhm.
Then there's our typical pool conditions.
What were the waivers again?
That was a project that didn't have any.
No,
waivers. It's one of the few.
it had the 2-foot.
Oh, 2 foot, yeah. And then we also wanted 24th. That was one that we wanted the fencing to be relocated back out to the 37
Oh,
and
right,
a half.
yeah.
So that would be the split rail fencing should be relocated to 37.5 feet from the vegetated wetland.
Mhm.
They clearly wanted to move it to like
50, we'd be so
50
happy.
feet or 100 feet, they're more.
Yeah.
And that's only to the vegetated wetland. That 50% doesn't apply to coastal bank buffer zones.
Right. Is there a motion to approve as amended?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
That passes unanimously. Okay, we close this one, right? Moving on to Elizabeth and Robert Rothbard at 3 Brooks Farm Road.
Yes, this is the one that backs up to
Gingy.
Gingy Lane. We had just wanted to add the no cultivars
Yeah.
outside of 50 feet again.
Was this the one with the roses and the hydrangeas? And
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll put no cultivars
Within
or
50 feet?
non-native
Yeah.
species within the 50.
there a motion?
Move to approve as amended.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Carries unanimously. Okay, moving on to Sarah McLean at 6 Gull Island Lane.
Be honest, I couldn't think of any conditions for this thing. So other than good luck with that foundation. May the force be with you.
They are gonna find some cool stuff down there.
It's such a cool building. Just such a
Mhm.
shame it's in such a tough shape.
Yeah, last owner didn't do anything to it, so who's gonna restore it?
It's cool. It's one of those cool like
It
carriage
really
houses
is.
that was there.
All right, is there,
Move to approve as drafted.
is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously.
Lucky day.
Okay, so moving on to other business, approval of minutes from August 14th. So there's a second, all right, all in favor?
Aye.
Thanks for taking our minutes. Monitoring report, 17 Eat Fire Spring.
Did you guys have any questions on that? Or did you have anything you wanted to say? Anyone? We just got it sent in, so if you have questions, you can send those back, or I don't really have anything to add to
To say.
what they've provided.
Okay.
Oh, thanks for the report and have it being on time.
Yeah, need more of that. Okay, on to reports, the crack.
Second meeting is the 3rd of September, so
Okay.
nothing to report.
Nothing there. CPC,
Nothing special, just approve some money and moving on. Next thing.
When's that open up, do you know, for applications?
I think it's early next month. We're still determining dates, so it's gonna be what?
Not that I have a planned application, but it's like,
Yeah.
Like goodie bags they call it.
yeah.
Yeah. I'm working.
all right.
Those applications, they're, very involved applications.
They are, it's a lot of
It takes some time.
paperwork.
It is. The last two I did, the smallest one is like that thick. It's just
Oh God, the
They're big.
trees.
big applications.
11 down
Okay,
copies.
NP and EDC.
It's not, there was no meeting in August and they don't meet till the 16th of September.
Okay.
September 16th.
And no mosquito control. So commissioners' comments. I would love to see a regulations discussion put on again. I don't know if it should be informal where we collect more
So-
information.
We've compiled a good chunk of that list you guys gave us to do, so I'll try to send that out for the next prior to, and we'll do a separate link for it. And then you and I can talk about when we wanna put that on. Maybe just an update, and then maybe we'll have a discussion about a date to set, to just kind of do that separately.
Okay.
But we have been working on it, so.
And then my one other comment, when we are saying no cultivars, are people submitting like their plant invoice to you? Like, how are we confirming that? Cause I just worry that our nurseries don't carry the straight species.
No, so we've gotten kind of a mixture. Some people submit those. Sometimes in site inspections, we collect tags off plants. Some of the landscapers will call with questions about that. Everyone that we've asked has provided information back.
Okay.
So that's usually how we do it. Sometimes if we know they're doing the work, and that's what's nice about Start Work Forms, is we can kind of check in on when things are happening. Or if we go by and just drive by a site, if stuff's getting planted, you can simply stop and snipe the tag off the plant before they take it.
Okay.
So that's usually how we do
How we
it.
doing
Or
it?
just ask.
Any other commissioner comments? Administrator staff reports?
Yep, so just a reminder, tomorrow, Thursday, is the on-site out at Baxter Road, 85 Baxter Road. So we did post it. George will be there, and I have to drive out the folks from UP and from MIPA. So I'll just confer with George, but we may, if we could just get everyone together for a second at 85 Baxter right before that meeting starts, we may call to order if George thinks it's necessary to do. So it'd just be as simple as call the order, and then you guys can function. And then you just need to remember that at least a quorum of individuals needs to get together when we're done at the onsite and adjourn. It's pretty straightforward, but it's just kind of a precautionary thing. So we'll try to, between Joanne and I, we'll try to rally everyone together. So if everyone could try to be there, I know it starts at 11. I know schedules are tough. If at least 4 of you guys could be there 5 minutes, 10:55. I honestly, you're gonna be late.
No, I'm gonna be there if I have to take the time.
Is
I'm taking the time.
Ian can call the order, or if Ashley and Ian are late, as long as there's 4 of you, I really don't care who calls a meeting to order. We can figure it out. But just in case, if George doesn't think it's necessary to do, then we're off the hook, and I'll let everyone know you guys are off the hook. But we posted it as just in case, just in case. But that's it.
If you do call to order, could somebody record?
Oh, yeah,
So I can take
that will be me,
comment?
yes. And the whole thing's gonna be recorded anyways by TV 18, I guess now.
Oh, okay.
So we'll have the whole.
How did
boy.
Petra Landing's meeting go?
Oh, so Petra Landing was the, I always say it wrong, the Office of Dispute Resolution, Administrative Dispute Resolution. They're kind of interesting, as she came out and had some very specific questions. Just as far of a site visit, we didn't really, they're appealing the state's superseding order. So the state had a representative there. The applicant's representative, so Art and Glenn would represent the land bank in that case, did most of the answering of questions and showing on the site where they had delineated coastal bank to be and what the dispute is all about. But I thought it went very well, and everyone behaved civilly, and I don't really feel like there were any real issues. And
Nobody threw down.
hopefully that will continue, and our decision will continue to be upheld, and everyone will be happy.
Good. Is there a motion to adjourn?
All moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned.